Hey guys, it's Kendra.
And this is Jessica, and you're listening to
Lucid Lab. I am still kind of not done moving, but I officially moved last Saturday and I'm still unpacking my house.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a nice break to come over here.
Yeah, and it's going to be a long break.
Yeah, I'm going to be here pretty much all day. We're doing a two-parter, so I am prepared. I brought snacks and wine for later. Not
for
now.
Later.
It's way early right now.
It is. This is the earliest we recorded, I think.
In a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got up early because I wanted to get a walk in. So I've been up since like 7 on a Saturday. Not so cool, but
I cleaned, so I walked around my house a lot.
Yeah. I'm still doing that. I think I mentioned on here before where I'm trying to make the money. So I've got 1 day left and I'm not going to fail. Usually I make this my rest day, but it just didn't work out this week and I have to get my steps in today. So I might be walking at midnight tonight with my mace.
With mace. Yes, I gave her a little mace.
Yes, you did. Jessica's taking care of me because I was telling her about all the walking I'm doing. And sometimes it'll be the middle of the day and there'll just be random men for whatever reason out and they don't even look like they're out exercising. They're just kind of wandering. So yeah, better safe than sorry.
Yep. Sure is. And you have bears too. Not that that would.
And bobcats.
Yeah, I know.
Although we're in a different part, we moved back into my house, which is a little closer towards Jessica, closer towards Denver. And I'm excited about being out there. And the number one thing I'm most excited about is it's my house that I own. So now I can decide if I want to get more animals. And
she's already decided.
I've already picked out a cat and we're picking him up on Monday.
And he's so cute. He's a little black one like mine.
Yes, he's a little black tuxedo. He has little white paws and
he has like a diamond in the middle of his forehead.
He looks very distinguished. So we're trying to figure out a name for him. We have about 5 different names picked out and we're doing a poll.
Oh, geez.
On my kids' Instagram right now. We're going to see.
Okay.
So yeah, I will update everyone once we get him into his new home and see how he does with Toffee, our little girl cat. I had read many times that boys are better to put with other girls that you've had for a while. Like a boy and a girl cat don't fight as much. And then also boy cats are supposedly cuddlier. So I want a cuddle cat.
They also like to pee.
Well, the good thing is he's only 6 months old and they neutered him right away. So that stops them from that behavior, supposedly. Good. So it won't stop him from wanting to like claw everything.
That's true.
So we'll see. He seemed pretty mellow when I met him and he just like purred and laid down on my lap. So
he hasn't had the expanse of your house to wander through though. So we'll see.
I might be regretting it in a week, but that's where we're at right now. It'll be fun.
I haven't had a boy cat before, so
I grew up with one. And then our friend Elizabeth, her cuddliest cat is her boy cat.
That's true. And that was a lie. I did have a boy cat, but he was murdered by my friend's dog. So I push that one out of my mind sometimes.
Yeah, Elizabeth, I was telling her about this boy cat and she's like, you're getting him young enough that you can make him super cuddly and he'll be like Prince Charming, which is her cat. And I was like, yes, he's my inspiration because he's like the sweetest, cuddliest little boy.
Just carry him around everywhere.
Yes. So I'm going to make this cat my couch potato cuddle bug.
Yay. I can't wait to meet him.
Yes.
I have nothing to share. I've been working and stuck in this case for the past few weeks now, and I'm glad to get it out.
Yes, it's always nice to get something out that's been like in your mind for weeks.
And this isn't a good case for my mind to be in.
Yes.
So I really do need to get it out.
They rarely are.
I know.
In our line of work on this podcast.
Yep. So this week I'm covering yet another story that, you know, I had it on my list because I haven't done really a serial killer yet. I mean, I touched on one in a couple episodes, but not a true serial killer episode. So I had this on my list and I'm like, oh, I'm just going to do this. And I'm being stupid again. And it was kind of going down the Lacey Peterson route, but this is even more.
Yeah.
So when I say I was not prepared, I was not prepared. I'm covering the absolutely despicable English serial killers, a married couple, Fred and Rose West.
And I know nothing about them.
Good, because this is going to shock you, I think. This is pretty bad.
So buckle my seatbelt.
Yes.
Get ready for a ride.
They're unlike anything I've come across yet, really. Wow. They're vile. Fred and Rose West lived at 25 Cromwell Street in Gloucester, a city in Gloucestershire, England. It was only minutes from a busy shopping center and college, but the street itself was quiet and dark. Coupled with a little bit of street lighting, the couple got away with a lot. This address would become famous for the horrific crimes that occurred there and what was found in and around it. I know you titled Ariel Castro's home as the House of Horrors, but this was 100 times worse and actually was labeled that as well.
Okay. Unfortunately, there's a lot of House of Horrors out there and not in the good, like, haunted house Halloween kind of way.
Nope. And one thing that I have to constantly remind myself of in this case are the ages of Fred and Rose.
Okay.
Especially Rose, because when she was officially arrested, she was only 40.
Wow.
And when I go over the span of their crimes, we're talking decades. So she started very young. It's just crazy. If you do not know this story, like you said, buckle in. And I'm not really talking to our UK or European listeners because I believe some of them would prefer that we don't cover this case because I think it's been overdone in some areas. Yeah. But I never heard of it. So it's crazy that I've never heard of it because of how insane this story is. So if you're like Kendra or myself and you hadn't heard of it yet, please stay. It is going to be a two-parter. And I don't typically give warnings, but this one you do need to know that there's going to be incest, abuse, prostitution, rape, torture, kidnapping, murder, and everything in between.
So everything absolutely horrendous. Okay, I think I need to tap out. It's
just one of those stories where you think that there's a line that can't be crossed, and it's crossed.
Wow.
Again and again. So it's a hard one. But as we do, we are going to start off with the history of these two because the behavior and trauma that created the monsters they became is generational.
Oh, yeah.
They were not oddballs in their families. Well, they were. They were oddballs in their families, but their families weren't normal, I would say. This isn't a case where the families were blindsided by their horrible nature because something was bound to happen with these two regardless.
And then they found each other. That's scary too.
Scary part is they were made from the same cloth and they came together and became
multiplied the evil
20 times worse. Yes. And one note, actually, one of the parents I don't include in this clump of crap they grew up in.
Okay. And so there was one decent parent.
Yeah.
Okay.
But she was a victim herself. And had she known, maybe something could have been done, but she was already struggling, and so I don't put any blame on her. All right, so we're going to start with Fred because he's 12 years older than Rose.
Okay.
And we're going to go into depth because these childhoods were nuts. Fred was born Frederick Walter Stephen West on September 29th, 1941. He was the first child of Walter Stephen West and Daisy Hannah Hill, and boy, were these two just lovely people.
Uh-oh.
And I say that he's the first child, but he's the first living child.
Oh, okay.
The family lived in Muchmarket, Herefordshire, which is a small village between the market towns of Ledbury and Ross-on-Wye. It is 120 miles west of London and 14 miles from Gloucester across the River Severn. It's a very beautiful place, green as the eyes can see. But it's one of those places where everyone knows everyone and everyone is pretty private. Muchmarket is the home of an ancient settlement dating back to the Iron Age. It has been a rather uneventful place outside of a landslide that happened in 1575, but this was no ordinary landslide. It was 15 feet high, and it moved 2 million cubic feet of earth over 3 days.
Okay.
Destroying everything in its path. And it was such an event that it was titled The Wonder. And people came far and wide to see the results because there was nothing better to do.
It was a very boring time in history.
Before we talk about Fred's childhood, we have to talk about his father because, like I said, this is generational. Just bad seed after bad seed. Walter West was from Ross-on-Wye. Life with his father was tough. He was very strict. Walter dropped out of school at the young age of 11 and started helping his grandfather with farm work. He married his first wife at 23 years old, and she was 22 years older than him.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's quite robbing the cradle. That's like your child.
Odd pairing.
Yeah.
They discovered that she was unable to have children, so they decided
because she was
to foster
80?
a child.
Okay.
They fostered a child. He was 1 year old, a little boy named Bruce. One day, she suddenly died after being stung by a bee.
Oh, shit. That's a new fear for me.
I know.
I've never been stung by a bee.
Me either.
I'm always afraid.
Me too. They were only married for about 1.5 years when she died. He seemed to love her, even keeping a photo of her mounted somewhere everywhere he lived for the rest of his life.
Well, that's not going to make you feel great if you're his new wife.
Well, she dealt with it. But without her, he didn't think that he could take care of the boy alone, so he gave him back to the orphanage.
That's sad.
You know, you'll see that a lot in this.
It's not a puppy. It's not even puppies I won't give back. It's like if you commit to something.
Yep.
Wow.
Some people just shouldn't be parents, but
right.
You also have to recognize your limits, and he knew that, so it's probably better for that kid.
Probably better for the child, hopefully.
A couple months later, Walter ended up at a fair being held in Muchmarkel. It is a yearly fair that started in the 1890s, and it actually still happens today.
Okay.
I believe. There he met Daisy Hannah Hill. She was there hosting a needlework stall. Her family, who had been farmers in the area for generations, and because they lived on a hill and their last name was Hill, and people found them to be simple-minded, the townspeople referred to them as the Hillbillies.
That's not very nice.
No. Walter was 25 when he met 16-year-old Daisy. One thing led to another, and they married in 1940, and almost right after, she was pregnant. Fred wasn't their first. Like I mentioned, he was their first surviving child. The first pregnancy led to a premature little girl named Violet, who only lived for a few days.
Oh.
After this, they moved to Bickerton Cottage. So homes in this area, they all had names.
They still do, I think. In the UK.
I don't know anything
little
over there.
towns.
I would love to go over. She's been.
Yes.
She knows more. She might stop me at some point and say, that's wrong.
I doubt that, but I'm not that knowledgeable.
But this home that they moved to was 100 years old, and it did not have electricity or gas or a bathroom. Water came from a hand-pumped well in the garden, and they used a bucket as their toilet. So I guess you could say that they were poor, but they still had a house, so it's not like dirt poor. But shortly after, Daisy was pregnant again, and then Fred was born. Fred was born with bright blue eyes, which he had throughout life. Very bright blue eyes, and blonde curly hair, which turned very dark brown, almost black, later on. Growing up, he had a prominent gap between his two front teeth. And I might have to make you look at these people at some point so you have an idea.
Okay.
He was baptized 1 month later, but his family was ultimately anything but holy.
Oh.
Even though they had been baptized at this church for generations. So it was just what you did, I guess.
Just a record in the books.
Right. But Daisy adored Fred.
Okay.
Almost too much.
Uh-oh.
Later, I would definitely say too much. But over the next decade, they had 6 more children.
That's a lot.
Yep. John Charles Edward was born in November of 1942. He'll come into play throughout this 6th story. Their third son, David Henry George, was born in 1943, but he only lived for a month. After this, they moved to a different home called Hill's Barn. She gave birth to their first daughter, Daisy Elizabeth Mary, in September of 1944. Later, she took on the nickname Little Daisy, while her mother was Big Daisy.
Okay.
They moved a last time in 1946 to Moorcourt Cottage, a larger home. Not by much. It had 3 bedrooms, but still a bucket for a toilet that they had to empty every day.
Ew, with that many people in the house.
It's a lot. Not long after moving there, she gave birth to their last son, Douglas. 14 months after that, they had Kathleen, later known as Kitty. And their last girl was born in 1951, and her name was Gwen. And that's a lot of children to give birth to in a decade.
Yeah.
She had 8 pregnancies overall.
And she started right away after they got married.
Right away.
So very young age to be having all those babies.
That does something to a woman's body and mind. So she wasn't the same sweet girl anymore.
No. Yeah. Her hormones were all over the place for like 10 years straight.
Yeah. The couple shared a room. The girls had a room and the boys had a room, some sharing beds. But after all these kids came into the picture, Fred was still Daisy's favorite.
Okay.
But this bond between them turned into something else later.
Oh, no.
Fred's brothers were close with their dad, and Fred wasn't. But that didn't mean that his dad didn't try to teach him. Not the right things, that's for sure, but he still took Fred under his wing from time to time. As a child, Fred was pretty scruffy looking. He went to the only school in the area with his brother John. They had to walk 2 miles just to get there. It was a strict school. Fred wasn't very popular and was getting in trouble often. And as punishment, they would cane the children once they hit the age of 8. And anytime this happened, Daisy wouldn't have it, and she would go to the school and start yelling at the teachers.
Well, I would too.
Yep, you don't hit my kid.
Not with a cane. Oh my God. Oh, you don't hit my kid at all, but
Right.
A cane? Come on, that's abusive.
Yep. This caused Fred to be bullied at school as a mama's boy.
Oh, shit.
All of the children of the home worked alongside Walter and Daisy when it came to farming and chores. At first, it would seem, despite the poverty and doing what they could to make it by, the family was pretty close-knit. They spent evenings listening to the radio together. Walter only took out a leather belt when it became too much. Now we have to remember, this is back then.
Everybody spanked everybody back then, yeah.
Everybody spanked everybody.
They did.
Fred and John were close, but John, although younger, was bigger than Fred and was annoyed by Fred often, which led to John beating up Fred a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But it was no normal family. Even though some family members will come out later saying that they were a normal family, I believe it was the youngest, Doug. He probably saw less.
Okay.
But in my opinion, I think that was also just to save face. I mean, his family's being destroyed and, questioned and how Fred grew up. But I think how Fred ended up being did have something to do with his childhood as well. But you'll see that there's a lot going on here.
Yeah.
For instance, Walter was sexually assaulting and raping his daughters from a young age.
Oh, gross.
And Walter had nothing to hide when it came to that. He said it was natural and his right.
What? Oh, my God.
And from what I read, it wasn't just his daughters, but other young girls in the area.
Ew.
I mean, that is a speculation as far as other young girls in the area, but I've heard it in a few different places. But incest seemed to be generational. Fred grew up thinking that it was literally okay.
So I wonder if Walter's dad was assaulting like his sisters in the house or something.
Yeah, I would assume that's
what he
in
means
his
by that,
family
right?
somewhere it was happening. I don't know if he had sisters, to be honest. It's going back too far for me to look into.
Incest is a really hard one for me.
Mm-hmm.
It does not make sense to me. Like when you have a child, that's like your
Yep.
person to take care of. Like I don't understand how you can look at a child and think sexual thoughts.
Yep.
It's your own child.
It's your child. I don't understand.
That's so fucked up to me.
Yeah. But Fred grew up thinking that it was okay. It's normal for a grown man to rape little children. It's just what people do.
It's
thought
what
everyone
saw
did
growing
it.
up all the time.
Yep.
It's only a 3-bedroom house. It's not hidden.
And it suggested that it wasn't just in his family, like in this area. It was probably more prominent.
Okay.
Just these small knit countryside places where generations and generations have always lived there. I think a whole book was written on it. I can't remember what it's called, but I'm not trying to put anybody down in a specific
Yeah, we don't want to assume everyone from this village
but
is
apparently
ancestral.
there's this book about this particular area.
I mean, if you read the Bible, I don't know, it doesn't sound like they're religious, but there was a lot of incest in the Old Testament too.
Yeah, it's
If you
everywhere.
want to be...
Doesn't make it okay.
No, fuck no. Not at all.
That's my point, is somewhere like, well, it's always it's kind of like this stance of everybody does it. So.
But is it what we should be doing? And is it
No.
leading to a better life?
Right.
No. Just because one guy back in the day couldn't keep it in his pants around his daughter, that doesn't mean it's okay for everybody in the future to do it.
Right.
Just because he did it.
Yep. But it wasn't just Walter. Daisy, his mother, although she didn't molest the girls, she took Fred's virginity when he was 12.
What?
So there's that.
the fuck? What the fuck?
And when you see photos of his parents, yikes.
Why?
I
Oh
don't
my
like
God.
to judge physical appearance, but they were both scary to me. Actually, I'm going to show you real quick, please.
You can get my real reaction. Wow. I just saw some pictures and that was definitely not going to be welcomed by the girls or the boys.
No, it's a
From
lot
either
to take
side.
in. It's a
Ew.
lot. As a child, you shouldn't be molested at all, but to have these two creeping up on you in the middle of the night, I would rather die, I
And
think.
you're stuck there with them. That's
Yeah.
who you live with.
But it was shortly after this that Fred started to rape his own sisters.
Oh, God.
It's just what families do.
They
right?
need more hobbies. They need to play chess. They need to do something other than just sex.
Mm-hmm. And just after entering puberty, Fred started to rape girls outside of the home in the fields, having no care of their age or identity. It was his right, and it was totally normal. So Fred's already
he's already fucked.
He's already fucked
in the head.
Yeah. Fred left school at 15 years old, but was said to still have no more reading or writing ability than a 7-year-old, which,
ouch.
I don't know. I feel like it's kind of normal back then, especially if you're farmers. I don't think some people would stay in school for long. I don't think his dad did either.
Because what are you going to do with that? You're just going to be farming. That's the
right.
most
If you know
part.
what you're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
So that didn't really surprise me. He started farm work with his dad. It was around this time after his father had an accident on the farm that Fred and John started going to Ledbury on the weekends for things, but ended up becoming part of the teenage scene there.
Okay.
There were several places for teenagers to hang out, smoke cigarettes, drink Coke and coffee, watch movies, dance, play pool, and listen to music. So Fred, who has always looked like he rolled out of a pig pen, started to care about his looks.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason during this time, despite his super yellow teeth, he was the talk of the town for a little bit. And the girls chit-chatted about him because he was kind of good looking at this time. They thought he was one of the best looking boys, I guess, but doesn't matter what you look like when you're vulgar and rude, which he was.
He had no manners.
He would just go up to a girl and grab them or fondle them. Like literally walk right up to a girl who had a boyfriend and just take her by the arm and try and take her away. His behavior was so much that John had to defend him often because these guys would come after him, but Fred wouldn't fight. So John would have to jump in as his bodyguard and make these guys go away. He literally never fought back. But it was also during these visits to Ledbury that he became obsessed with wanting to buy a motorcycle.
Okay.
Boy thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
So he saved up all his money and he bought a 125cc James at 17. I looked it up. They're actually kind of cool looking.
Yeah.
They look more like a long bicycle with an engine. So not like the motorcycle I would think of. Daisy didn't want him to have it, obviously, but she's just being a protective mom or girlfriend.
Lover.
Whatever.
Rapist.
Well, on the evening of November 28, 1958, he got into an accident.
Which usually happens if you have a motorcycle.
Right. He collided with a girl on a bicycle close to his home. It's unclear what caused the accident. Some say that he ran into her on purpose, but I think it was just dark outside. The girl thankfully only had some scrapes. A man found them both. Fred was unconscious and bleeding. He was driven 14 miles to Hereford Hospital. He was in a coma for a week.
Oh, damn.
He had lacerations, broken bones, and had surgery for a skull plate. He broke his nose. He seriously injured his arm, which would go on to give him problems for the rest of his life. And his leg was smashed. He had to wear a metal brace on it for months after. This accident changed him.
He hit his head hard.
Mm-hmm. His nose was crooked now, and one leg was shorter than the other, so he had a bit of a limp.
Okay.
But as soon as he could, he got back to the teenage scene. He was even more short-tempered than he was before, and now he would kind of fight back.
Oh.
I guess.
Okay.
He just had more of an attitude.
Yeah.
This is when he met the girl who would become his first wife, 16-year-old Catherine Bernadette Costello. She was born April 14th, 1944. She had brown hair and blue eyes and went by Rena. They met at a dance in Muchmarkel. Rena was from Coatbridge, Scotland. She was one of 5 sisters. Her mother left when she was young and her father raised them and 2 cousins on his own, but drank in the evenings. So not much parenting going on.
Yeah.
No incest that I found, though, so that's good. But Rena got in trouble with the cops often, starting at a young age for theft. Her first offense was at 11 in 1955. She was sent home then, but convicted in 1957 and 1959 for stealing. And in 1960, she left Scotland and ended up in Muchmarkel to stay with some people she knew. And she was exciting to Fred.
Okay.
And she didn't mind his need for sex. Like, she was already active.
Okay.
It was an intense relationship, and she ended up even self-tattooing his name on her arm.
Oh. Yeah, first love kind of shit.
But he became overwhelming, and they started to fight, and she went back to Scotland after just a few months.
Okay.
At this point, Fred is 19, and he turned his attention to his 13-year-old sister, Kitty.
Oh.
He says he seduced and slept with her for 6 months. No, he raped her.
You don't seduce a 13-year-old. That's your fucking sister, dude.
No. And he went back to bothering girls in Ledbury during those teenage hangout nights on the weekends. One night, he was at a club that had 2 levels, and he was out on a fire escape with a couple people, and he tried to grab a girl. I think he reached under her skirt, and instead of taking it, she turned around and hit him.
Good for her.
And he either toppled over the railing or fell down the stairs, but it was about a 10-foot fall.
Too bad he didn't die.
Hitting his head on the concrete below.
Mm-hmm.
And, he already had that serious head injury before, which was, I think, almost a couple years ago at this point.
So we're just adding more.
Mm-hmm. He was out cold and his head was bleeding again. Shit. He was taken to the hospital again, and he woke up a day later. Even though Fred was already unhinged, he became even more moody and short-tempered, and his family thought he had brain damage, which
he did.
Because he did. Your brain can only take so much of a beating.
Yeah.
After this, Fred turned to stealing. It didn't go well. He and his friend left the store, but the store owner knew who did it and caught them later that day. In April of 1961, they were found guilty and had to pay a fine. This earned Fred his first of what would eventually be many features in a newspaper.
Okay.
Small town, though.
But did he like the notoriety?
Probably. Who knows? Yeah. 2 months later, he was back in court, not for stealing, but for rape and incest of his sister because Kitty was now pregnant.
Oh, my God.
But that wasn't the only problem. He was an adult, and he was 6 years older than her. When questioned about it, with the authorities attempting to explain the seriousness of this to him, he was genuinely confused. Didn't everyone have sex with children?
Oh my God.
He literally said, well, doesn't everyone do it?
Oh my God.
And he was charged with unlawful carnal knowledge of a child. Now, this is what's weird. It's totally okay for him to sleep with his mother. But I'm thinking that maybe his mother didn't know what he was doing with his sisters because once she found out, nope, he crossed a line.
What?
Even his father joined in judging him.
What?
Even though he's the one that taught Fred this stuff.
To rape
apparently. Yeah. So, I don't know. They were disgusted with him and kicked him out.
A very curious, idea of what's right and wrong.
I guess. He was sent to live with his mother's sister, Violet, and her husband, Ernie, at another cottage in Muchmarkle.
Hopefully they didn't have young daughters.
No. Violet and Ernie actually loved Fred, and they didn't believe that he did it, even though he admitted to it, and his sister came forward. So I don't know why they deny that it happened. Probably just a family thing.
Did his sister end up having the baby?
No.
Okay.
Trial was set for November. Fred stopped working with his father and took on odd jobs, mostly building stuff, carpentry, bricklaying. He did this for the rest of his life, actually. He tried stealing again and again was caught and fined.
He needs a new path. That's
he
not
does
going to
this
work
for
out
the
for
rest
him.
of his life, and he
always gets caught.
Yeah. His answer was essentially, well, other people steal, why can't I? So he just
that was always his excuse.
Yep.
I didn't know it was wrong.
Everybody else does it. Then there was some story about raping yet another girl who was 14 or 15, but he said he wanted to marry her, but she said she was raped, so you know how that goes.
Yeah, he wanted to marry her. She had zero interest. Come on.
She's like, he just took me. That doesn't mean anything. But nothing happened with that.
I feel like every girl in this town is getting assaulted.
Probably. It's a small town. That's what's so scary about some of these places. They're so beautiful, but with so little people in the area, it's probably a scary place to be. I don't know. Sucks.
It does.
On November 9th, 1961, he went to court for what he did to Kitty. His mother, even though she was so appalled by his actions, showed up in his defense.
She had a change of heart.
Well, she loved him, remember?
In many ways. Much.
There was also a doctor there to explain the head injuries he experienced as the explanation for his personality changes. But none of that mattered because Kitty retracted her statement and did not testify, and he walked free, which makes me I assume she was pressured to not say anything.
Of course.
She might have even been threatened,
Absolutely.
She had an abortion, and people that knew her said that after this, she was never the same until her death.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I imagine that would change you.
Yes, it would. But he still wasn't allowed home, at least for another year. They let him come back in the summer of 1962, which sucks because then you're around your abuser.
Yeah, poor girl.
Poor girl. Around the same time, Rena came back from Scotland and reunited with Fred. Rena had been through quite a bit in the 2 years that she was gone. She had dyed her hair blonde. She was a prostitute and did 17 months for that.
Wow.
So she spent most of her time
In jail.
in jail. She was caught for stealing again as well, but tried to clean up her act a bit and study nursing right before she left. But she had a brief affair with an Asian bus driver and became pregnant. And he wanted nothing to do with that, and her family disowned her for it. Fred found out about this and offered to give her an abortion himself.
That's not your skill set, buddy.
He tries to make it a skill set for the rest of his life. Apparently, he was very interested in wanting to try giving girls abortions.
Okay.
And I guess they tried and somehow were seen attempting to do this, like in the forest, and someone called the cops. And they stopped mid-procedure, and Rena was still pregnant.
That makes my whole insides hurt just
I know.
thinking about trying.
They decided to get married instead.
And have the baby?
Mm-hmm. They married on November 17th, 1962. Fred was 21 and Rena was 18. Daisy wasn't happy about it.
Wait, she was 18, so that means she was prostituting while she was under 18?
Yeah.
This kind of stuff really makes me mad.
I know.
She gets arrested for prostitution, but all these men are assaulting and raping women all over. And
she's
fine.
a kid. That's cool. Yep.
Fucked up. I'm not going to say anything bad about the UK because believe me, we have this shit in the US too. It's everywhere, but wow.
Yeah. So there was no room at the house for Fred and Rena to stay there as well. So they moved to Scotland 11 days later.
Okay.
But life wasn't easy for them, or should I say, life with Fred was not easy for Rena. While she was pregnant, he was violent.
Oh.
She was often covered in bruises. He demanded sex constantly, regardless of what she was doing, and he would forcibly take it.
Oh, dude.
It was always short and brutal and would often leave Rena in tears.
Oh.
If she refused, he beat her. He also started to enjoy hurting her during the act.
Oh.
Pinching her very hard in private areas, which
Oh
my whole body just cringes.
That just made
with that.
me, yeah, same thing.
And he also started to develop, the fetish of wanting to tie her up.
Oh.
But she wouldn't let him tie her up. She was very
That's scary.
specific about that. So violent rape became her daily life.
Wow.
Her baby was born March 22nd, 1963. A little girl named Charmaine Carol Mary.
Charmaine. I haven't heard that before.
I know. It's a pretty name.
I like it.
They told her family some weird story to explain why the child had darker skin. Clearly, it's not Fred's child.
Mm-hmm.
For Fred's parents, who apparently thought it was Fred's child, Rena wrote to tell them that she had a miscarriage and that they decided to adopt.
Okay. To explain.
Which just sucks because this poor little baby, like her mom is even lying about who she is. I don't know.
Your mother's already embarrassed about you.
I don't think she was, but she
Of
doesn't
the
really
time,
have a choice,
Yeah, she would have been ostracized.
Right. Fred did not like the little girl and left Rena for a while. I'm sure she wished he would leave forever.
Correct. And marrying him was the worst option she could have done.
She's connected to him forever now. While he was gone, she moved to the Bridgerton area of Glasgow in July of 1963. This was 25 Savoy Street. She had an older woman caring for Charmaine while she worked nights as a sex worker to get by.
Oh.
But Fred came back before Christmas 1963, and he started working as a Mr. Whippy ice cream truck driver for the Walls Company.
Oh, God. Now he's around children.
Mm-hmm. And he used that ice cream truck to try and lure young girls. And he did.
Fuck.
Rena became pregnant again and gave birth to another little girl named Anna Marie Kathleen Daisy on July 6th, 1964. For the duration of this episode, I'm going to actually shift between Anna Marie and Anne Marie. So if you hear that, there's only one of them, but she changes it to Anne Marie later. So
okay,
if I say it one way or the other, just don't pay no mind.
Okay.
She went by both. With all the research, I wrote it in so many different ways. Mm-hmm. But in the beginning, he was distant and abusive towards Charmaine, sometimes slapping her while he doted on Anna.
Mm.
In addition to his luring and God knows what of teenage girls, he was also having several affairs and is said to have fathered other children with some of those women. We know of at least 2 that he fathered in Scotland, although he boasted that there are many later in life, which I actually kind of believe. Anyway, during this time, one was born in July of 1966, a boy named Stephen, and he had another son with another woman in Glasgow, a boy named Gareth. He had nothing to do with their lives, really, though. Stephen does come back into the story for like a little bit, but other than that, he just impregnates women and like his sperm's all over the fucking place.
Gross.
I feel bad for any child that grows up to find out that their father was Fred West.
Yeah, you don't want to know.
Hopefully they don't.
Stay illegitimate and don't know. It's easier that way. And I love how you said he was having affairs. I'm like sitting here like, were they really affairs or was it just women he grabbed and said, I think you're going to fuck me?
Exactly. I think it's a mixture of everything though.
Yeah.
He just had to be constantly doing something.
Something happened with his brain and it connected to his dick and it just couldn't like not be, he's like a rabbit.
I know, but he was already doing this shit before the head injury.
Yeah, you're right. It wasn't the head injury because he was already raping little girls.
It was just
amplified or something.
Well, with his constant affairs / raping, Rena felt like it should be okay if she had an affair. She started seeing a bus driver. I guess she likes bus drivers. His name was John McLaughlin. He was married too, but he was in the process of a divorce.
That's what they always say.
I know. He knew of the violence she endured and seemed to really care for her. He would come over when Fred was out, but one time John and Rena were playing cards at like another unit in their place when Fred's face was suddenly at the window staring at them. He yelled at her to get outside and started beating her, punching her, kicking her, and John intervened and punched Fred, and Fred sliced him with something across the stomach. I guess it wasn't enough to seriously harm him, and John just punched him again, and that's when Fred stopped. Fred was no match for another man. He never was.
Yeah, he wasn't a fighter.
Nope. Because this happened again when Fred saw the two of them hugging outside. Mm-hmm. Rena and John were in love.
Okay.
He tattooed her name on his wrist, and I found out that he crossed out Fred's name. Like he literally crossed out Fred's name on her arm and then wrote his name.
Like with a tattoo?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And of course, Fred did not like that and beat her viciously for it. Mm-hmm. But this went on for a while. Fred would beat Rena, and then if John found out, John would go beat Fred. So it was this vicious,
like just get
abusive
divorced
situation. You know, we are talking about back then, though.
Yeah,
and she has kids now,
leave.
and you know they're not going to give her custody of the children. Mm-hmm. She can't go get a house by herself. You know, like there's a lot of things.
Women
in the
were
situation.
Trapped,
right? While out one day at a cafe, Rena met a teenage girl looking for work and asked her if she wanted to come be her nanny. Her name was Issa McNeil. Issa took the job, but immediately noticed the mistreatment of the children. Their beds were not really beds, but little jail cells. He created 2 sections, one on top of the other, in the bottom section of a bunk bed. When Fred was home, the girls had to stay in there, especially Charmaine, for hours on end. But it was a job, and Issa ended up bringing another friend there from time to time, Anna McFall. She was 16. They were best friends. Anna wasn't a happy kid. Her parents weren't together. She didn't get along with her mom, and her father wasn't really in the picture. And her boyfriend had just recently died a really tragic death. It was by electrocution.
Ouch.
Yeah. It was a work accident. So she was still traumatized and didn't want to be home. And Anna is important because we're going to come back to her.
Because I'm sure Fred's going to want to do something to her.
He wants them all. Later that year in 1965, Fred had an accident with his ice cream truck. And not the type you'd think. He ran over a little boy and killed him.
Fuck.
People were outraged. But Fred was not charged because another little boy around the same time was killed by another ice cream truck, so they considered it an accident. It's just something that happens. Death by ice cream truck is common enough that they didn't look into it further.
That's insane.
It's scary, though. If you
is that
think
when they
about
added the music to warn the kids that the truck is coming?
I mean, you know, he could have done it on purpose, but the truth is like there weren't backup cameras and crap around that time. He's just a little boy.
I'm thinking he probably didn't do it on purpose. It's probably just he's looking the other way and hit a boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Fred didn't think people would want to buy from him anymore, and it made life in that community pretty uncomfortable. So he packed up and left for Muchmarkel in December of 1965. And he took the kids with him, and Rita stayed behind.
Uh-oh.
I'm sure she preferred to stay with John, but I don't know the exact reasoning for this at this time.
Don't send your daughters with that freak.
She didn't have a choice. Like, he used these kids. Okay. That's what I realized, like, once I got to the end of it. It's like, he used these kids to have the control over Rena.
Yeah.
That's how I see it anyway. As soon as he was in Muchmarkel, though, he put the kids into care of social services.
Okay.
They were in and out of foster care for a really long time.
That sucks.
He would get them and just like he was taking them there and getting them back. Like it seemed like whenever he wanted. I think it lasted for almost 5 years.
So they were like the free childcare when...
I guess. Like, I just don't understand how that doesn't become something that needs to be looked into.
Probably because they had too many other kids. It's probably just, unfortunately,
possibly
a symptom of the time.
He stayed at his family's home for a little bit before making home out of a caravan and staying at the Willows caravan site in Gloucester. He went back to get Rena in February of 1966, and then they got the children back. But Rena went back to Scotland often. I don't know why, if it was just family stuff. And then I also need to remember these places aren't that far away from each other.
No, they're like 30 minutes.
I think of America. And so when I'm like, oh, you're going to a different country, like that's
they're
a
right
2-day excursion, right?
Yeah.
No. At some point, she ended up inviting Isa and Anna to live with her in the caravan with Fred, and that they would all find work in the area.
Okay.
But it was tight. There were 6 of them, 4 adults and 2 kids in this tiny caravan. And at this point, Fred was working as a driver for a slaughterhouse and would come back every day covered in blood and fun stuff.
Smelly.
The tension was high, and Fred was violent with Rena, sometimes with Isa as well.
Okay.
He would beat Rena in front of everyone if he came back and dinner wasn't ready. Like, it could be in the oven, and if it wasn't done, he would beat her. Eventually, Rena and Isa connected with John, and they forged a plan for him to come and pick them all up one day because they wanted to get out of there. The plan was to meet him at a phone booth near the caravan park while Fred was at work.
Okay.
He did, along with another guy named John, who I guess was Isa's boyfriend. But Fred came back unexpectedly and a fight ensued.
Mm-hmm.
Rena was trying to grab the kids, but Fred was holding on to them. Fred told Rena that he would kill her if she came back. It was pretty explosive. She didn't want to leave the kids, but John put her and Isa in the car. John tried to grab the kids, but Fred wouldn't let them go. They also tried to get Anna to get in the car, but she wouldn't.
Okay.
They drove off, and Rena was scared for the kids, but mostly Charmaine because Fred didn't like her.
Yeah.
Apparently, Anna and Fred had cozied up to one another.
Ew.
She stayed and became his lover and took care of the kids. She was only 16. She didn't really know what she was doing.
No.
But she thought that they were going to get married.
She didn't realize that would be like the worst sentence ever.
Yes. They then moved to a different caravan site, Watermead, in Brockworth, Gloucester, in September of 1966. Rena was scared to go back to Fred, but built up the nerve to do it. And one day she went back and got the kids, but that's when she found out that he and Anna were together.
Okay.
She stole some things from Anna and another woman out of spite.
Why did she care at this point? Let her have him.
It's just
I know,
weird,
it's just these weird emotional connections.
Well, it was reported, and she tried to flee back to Scotland, but was arrested there.
Oh, God.
A police constable, Hazel Savage, picked up Rena and was taking her back to England for a trial. Rena told her all about Fred and his family, more specifically about Fred's abuse, mental state, and depraved sex addiction. Hazel's interest in his family started then.
Okay.
Ultimately, she was important in the official arrest over 2 decades later.
Wow.
Rena was ultimately convicted, but received 3 years probation. Once again, the kids were put into foster care.
Mm-hmm.
But even after that, she ended up going back to Fred in July of 1967. It was definitely one of those, the abusive relationship where the abused continues to go back.
Yes.
But I do feel like it was a control situation. And Fred himself had a really weird commitment to Rena as well. He would cheat on her constantly, but he never wanted her to know about it. Like, so he did try to hide it, and he didn't want to lose her. So Anna moved out. She went back to the Willows caravan site, but she was pregnant now with Fred's baby.
Fuck, dude, use some condoms.
And Fred continued to see her. And Anna was still in La La Land thinking that Fred loved her. She was writing letters and stuff. Fred loves me. She wanted him to divorce Rena and marry her. And Fred started to feel pulled between the 2 women. And I don't know if Anna was ever abused by him, but Fred was not going to officially leave Rena. He wasn't going to divorce her to be with Anna. And he didn't want Rena to know that Anna was pregnant with his child.
Okay.
So she must have not seen her when she came back, but she didn't know at the time. And Anna went missing from the Willows caravan site at the end of July, early August in 1967.
Okay.
She was 18 years old and nearly 7 months pregnant. She is believed to be his first murder.
Oh.
I don't believe she's his first, actually.
Yeah.
Just the first that we can link him to in a solid way because of their relationship. He denies that he killed her, but you'll see why.
Yeah.
I think that's stupid. She became a problem for him, so he got rid of her and his unborn child.
Mm-hmm.
And what I say next, we only know because of the discovery of Anna's body, I think it's 27 years later.
Wow.
Yeah. She was stabbed to death and Fred dismembered her. As you will see, this is a signature thing of his. When he dismembers, he always removes little bones, hand and feet bones.
Okay.
Before burying his victims, yes, to keep. Anna was also missing some ankle and wrist bones. Fred took his time with her. He carefully disarticulated her limbs. Later in life, Fred said that he dismembered her because it made burying her easier. It required a smaller grave. But the truth was, he enjoyed dismembering after the murder.
Yeah.
It's just another sick fantasy of his, like giving the girls abortions, like he needed to do stuff with their bodies. But Anna was pregnant, remember? So next to her body was her infant. My guess is that if he was fascinated with performing abortions, he probably wanted the chance to take a full-term baby out in a different way. Nearly full-term baby.
Gross.
It's just sick. He buried her in Finger Post Field in Muchmarkel near his childhood home. But as of right now, she's just missing from the caravan site. And that's all that was known for a really long time.
Yeah.
Like I said, she's not to be found for another 27 years. In reality, she was just a young girl looking for something better than home.
Yeah, she came from a shitty environment.
Yeah, she thought she found it in Fred, but he was a violent rapist pedophile that groomed her into believing they would have some kind of special life together.
Yeah.
Anna's disappearance was not noticed at first because people were unaware that she was even pregnant. So she didn't see a lot of people.
Right.
They thought that she ended up making her way to England after all, people that knew her from Glasgow. This whole time she had been writing her mother too. And when she stopped, that wasn't caught either because her mother died shortly after from malnutrition. Friends thought it was strange that she wouldn't be there for her mother's funeral. But there weren't cell phones back then, and it wasn't easy to track people down.
Yeah.
So she was never reported missing.
It's easy to get lost in the shuffle.
Disappeared.
Yeah.
Less than a month later, Fred moved his family to Lake House Caravan Site in the village of Bishop's Cleeve. It was on a lake, obviously. Rena moved in again, and they got the girls again out of foster care. Fred was a little different this time, more removed, which actually improved life for Rena some.
Mm-hmm.
She started working as a prostitute again to bring in money. Fred wasn't making much, so it did help. Even though he didn't like it at first, this prostitution, it became a turn on for him overall later.
Okay.
And I don't know if this was happening before, but it is known that he was sexually assaulting Charmaine.
Oh, of course. Of course he is.
By this time, she was 4.
4?
Mm-hmm. They lived together like this for about a year.
Ew.
In February of 1968, Fred's mother, Daisy, fell ill and ended up in the hospital. She had surgery to remove a gallstone. It was removed, but she ended up dying from complications on February 6th. She was only 44 years old. It's so weird.
That's
like
my age.
when we're talking about all this stuff, like I just picture these old people.
60s, yes.
Like, and it's not. These are all very young people. It's strange.
They all started so young. I mean, they're getting married at 16, 17, having babies.
Yeah. Time was not kind to her, though.
I mean, the picture you showed me, I thought she already looked 60. So
I know. Well, Fred did not visit her in the hospital, but he did go to her funeral with Rena. Meanwhile, something I keep forgetting to mention is Fred has been still stealing all this time. Petty little thief.
Mm-hmm.
But that goes hand in hand with these guys.
Yeah.
And he was caught shortly after his mom's death and had to pay another fine.
He's always caught.
He was really in and out of police stations a lot about this stealing. And if they had only let those crimes just add up and just put him away.
Get him out, yes.
For like long periods of time, like some of these women would still be alive.
Yeah.
But Rena was done with him again, and she left him in October of 1969. He was fired from a job for stealing and ended up getting another delivery job for a bakery. And while working one day, 27-year-old Fred ran into 15-year-old Rose.
Oh, no.
So finally, we're going to take a step back in time, and I'm going to introduce you to Rose.
15?
Yep, okay. 15. With the age difference, we don't have as much time to cover, but
yeah,
it's still shocking what she goes through. I was a 15-year-old once, and
yeah, I'm trying to think like what I would have thought of a 27-year-old.
It
would have grossed me out, I would think, but maybe not.
I myself was influenced by older men. Like they know what to do. They know what to say.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't happen, but it does. And some girls, we think we're all grown up already.
Yeah. And it makes you feel flattered.
And you're flattered.
That,
exactly.
oh my God, this older man wants me.
Me?
It's because I'm special.
And then they're abusive.
Yeah, of course.
So don't do it.
No.
If for any reason we have a young teenager listening to us who shouldn't be, don't do it.
They are never after your best interest.
Never.
And they are not your soulmate.
No, they are not. Rose was born Rosemary Pauline Letts on November 29th, 1953 in Northam, Devon in southwest England. Just as we did with Fred, we first need to take a look at her parents.
Okay.
William Andrew Letts, he went by Bill, and Daisy Gwendolyn Fuller.
Daisy was the name of the time.
Mm-hmm. Both of their parents' names were Daisy. That's just crazy. It must have been a common name.
It was yeah, I like it. It's cute.
I mean, it's cute, but it's weird that two people who come together to be serial killers both had
Moms.
a mother named Daisy.
Yes.
It is odd. Both of Rose's parents had their own issues, but this is the Daisy who didn't deserve what happened to her.
Okay, so this is the one good parent of them all.
I wouldn't call her good. Like, she had her struggles. She tried, but she wasn't hurting the kids. Like, she was the victim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like, just going back real quick to Fred, Rena seems like a victim in a lot of this
yes,
too.
Rena is
like,
definitely
Rena
a
was,
victim.
Yeah, she
Definitely.
was totally caught up.
Yep. Rose's father, Bill, he was born in 1921 in Northam, where he grew up, which is a little market town north of Bedford. It's kind of small and quiet like Muchmarkle.
Okay.
Bill's parents were Bertha and Bill Letts. It was not a happy marriage between the two. They both didn't want children and were disappointed when they found out that Bertha was pregnant.
Okay.
Bertha, however, as a mother should, came to love her only son. She adored him, actually. And although Bill had an initial interest when he was born, he was soon annoyed by Bill's existence.
He's probably jealous.
Bill Jr. was bullied early on in school and had a fairly strict upbringing. Nothing crazy that I could find before he was a teenager, but he did experience rejection from a first love when she left to marry someone else.
Okay.
Daisy was born in 1918 and was one of 9 children. She grew up in Chadwell Heath, Essex. Her father was a soldier and a veteran who raised them with very strict discipline. If they misbehaved, they got a whooping.
Mm-hmm.
When Daisy was of working age, she worked long hours at a pub, only getting a few hours of sleep a night, and it was really hard on her, so she picked up domestic work for a wealthy family, the Greens.
Okay.
She moved with them to Devon. One of Bill's closest friends became one of the Green boys, and when he was over at his house one day, this is how he met Daisy.
Okay.
They were both in their own ways pretty awkward, having grown up with strict parents. She wasn't attracted to him really, but she liked that he didn't mishandle or chase the girls.
Okay.
She thought that her father would approve of him. And he did. And they got married April 18th, 1942. They moved into Bill's parents' house for a little bit. Even though Daisy's father was strict, she had 8 brothers and sisters, so their home was bound to be a bit chaotic.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of kids. But Bill's home was very different. It was way too neat.
Yeah, he was only child.
She could immediately tell that Bill's father did not like him and was not interested in becoming a grandfather.
Okay.
But Bill, not wanting to be like his dad, said that he wanted a large family.
Does he even know what all that entails? Like,
No.
He grew up with, 2 parents who didn't even want him in a way. I mean, his mom, I guess, figured it out, but his dad didn't.
Right. Their first daughter, Patricia, was born in 1943 while they were still living with his parents. And Joyce, their second daughter, came 18 months later. Bill joined the Navy and was sent to the Philippines, where he was an operator. He went home in 1945, but stayed with the military. Their third daughter, Glennis, was born in 1950. Finally, they moved into their own home, and it was a new home with 3 bedrooms on a small estate. Although Bill didn't want to be like his father, he was. He was
like his kids?
way worse. More about the home.
Oh,
and that too. Yeah, he expected his home to be immaculate.
Oh, okay.
They started to fight often, and she started to fear what she got herself into because he would quickly turn to rage.
Mm.
Even though he was friendly and made friends with neighbors, he did not let her get to know the women in the neighborhood.
Oh,
she would only speak when they spoke to her, and she never called anybody by their first names.
Mm.
After Daisy became pregnant for a 4th time, Bill left the Navy. He had to work odd jobs, including being a TV repairman, and one time resorted to selling sandwiches at the beach. Good jobs were scarce in this area. He always complained, blaming Daisy for having to leave the military, which he actually quite enjoyed.
Ugh.
Daisy found happiness in making clothes for the girls and always looked back on that. No matter how hard life was, the girls were always really well dressed and well kept.
Okay.
But soon, Bill also had expectations of the girls. Once they were home from school, they went about constant chores. When Bill came home, he would literally run his finger along surfaces. Arguments between Bill and Daisy became violent. He started beating her, and people would see her walking around with black eyes.
Yeah.
On one occasion, neighbors actually witnessed Bill dragging Daisy while she was screaming. He was dragging her by her hair down the steps of their home. Then he started beating the children as well. Everyone was terrified of him. He was nice sometimes, but they never knew if it was real.
Yeah, you're walking on eggshells all the time.
And even if they behaved perfectly, he would just find a reason to beat them anyway. If Daisy tried to intervene, her punishment was just more severe. She was scared to tell her family. She kept it a secret outside of those who could hear her screaming and saw the bruises. Neighbors did confront him and police were called, but nothing was done.
Because that was considered your right as a man to beat your wife.
Yep.
You had to keep them in line. I'm so
bad.
fucking glad I live when I do. Every time I hear these stories, like these poor fucking women.
I know.
And we have our own problems now and oppressions and, rights we have to worry about. But
exactly.
Fuck.
I saw a video the other day that just like blew my mind. It just made me laugh, really. But there's this guy on TikTok. He's like, why are the women not like our grandmothers? And then there was a stitch. And the girl was like, because they couldn't leave.
They were stuck. I know.
Hello. They hated their lives.
That's why. Have you seen a lot of them were on Valium? That was the only way they existed. Watch Revolutionary Road.
You couldn't get a bank account. You couldn't do anything without his say-so.
You couldn't do shit. You just had to sit at home and take whatever your husband gave to you. And this is why it pisses me the fuck off when all these like fucking men are like, let's take it back to the golden age. The 50s were the golden age. It's like, no.
That's when you had slaves.
Yes.
And could do whatever you wanted.
That tells me everything I need to know about how you view women and minorities. If you say you want to go back to the 50s and 60s, like you need to just be gone from society.
You need to go missing. Now, remember at this time, Daisy is pregnant with her fourth child.
Okay. Is this Rose she's pregnant with?
No, not yet.
Oh, damn. She keeps going.
That's what you did back then.
Well, you had no birth control.
Exactly.
The other piece of it all that kept the women trapped.
Mm-hmm. She gave birth to Andrew in 1952.
Finally a boy.
Yep. It is with this pregnancy, though, that she had extreme postpartum depression.
Oh.
That is what they thought at first, anyway. She was ultimately referred to a psychiatrist for mental health issues after she had a severe nervous breakdown. She became an outpatient of a psychiatric unit at a hospital in Bedford where they suggested electroconvulsive therapy.
Oh, shit. And they probably put her on lithium and Valium.
Probably.
Things I was just mentioning.
She agreed. She had 8 treatments over, I feel like it's like over a year's time or something like that. Because somehow during these treatments, Bill got her pregnant again.
Ew.
With her 5th child. And her last session ended right before she was about to give birth. So she had these sessions while pregnant.
That can't be good for the baby.
No. And she had absolutely zero time to try and like put herself together after these treatments. Because she immediately had a little baby.
Was that Rose?
And this is Rose.
So Rose was born during the electroshock therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to probably cause some trauma.
Yep.
That little baby in the womb was being shocked.
Yeah. 8 treatments. Well, probably not all 8, but...
Once again, I'm just going to go back. This just makes me so angry. It's like women are like, I'm unhappy. And they're like, let's just, shock you.
Yeah.
Let's give you drugs and shock
you.
Let's not look at like, why is there a problem? Why is every woman in this country or county so depressed right now? Must be a female thing. It couldn't be because of society.
Well, something that Daisy didn't know at the time was that Bill was diagnosed but untreated with schizophrenia.
Okay.
He kept it from everyone. Daisy actually didn't find out until after his death when she got to see medical records.
How do you hide that shit?
She just thought he was a really fucked up guy.
Wow.
She just dealt with it.
He was just changing personalities.
He was just constantly in and out of personalities.
Okay.
I remember watching something and she was like, oh my God, like this
explains so much.
It makes so much sense. But with both of her parents mentally unwell, not to mention being cooked in the womb.
Yeah.
Rose had a rough start.
Yes.
And the house she went back to was hell. Daisy remembers that Rose never cried. She was a very good baby, but as she gained her motor skills, Rose started to rock herself in her bassinet violently.
Oh, no.
And as she grew up, she would rock her head for hours on end. She was different from the other children.
Yeah.
Her siblings, despite the abuse, were quite smart, and Rose was seen to be slow. She continued rocking into childhood, often like just super checked out, and would keep her siblings up at night doing it. But one thing that Rose did have is she was very beautiful. She was a beautiful little baby.
Okay.
Big doughy eyes. And it was to such a point that people would actually just comment about how pretty Rose was. She earned the nickname from her siblings Dozy Rosie for her lack of intelligence and her odd behavior.
She sounds kind of sociopathic a little bit
already.
Mm-hmm.
She was often left out of things her siblings were doing because she was too slow to keep up. Instead, she would hang out with her 6 hamsters or just sit there alone. That was until her younger brother, Graham, was born. She loved spending time with him, and for the rest of her childhood, got along better with those that were younger than her.
Okay.
Not too long after Rose started school, her older sisters, Patricia and Joyce, left the home, quite far removed in age.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know exactly when this happened, but I think that they were at least 17, 18 or something like that.
Yeah.
And they didn't really get to know Rose during her lifetime, which means she didn't have any older females to look up to in her family, and her mother was being abused. So that didn't help.
Yeah.
And her mother was battling her own mental illness.
And kept getting pregnant, apparently.
Yeah. As you can imagine, Rose did not do well in school. She had a hard time spelling even the simplest of words.
Mm-hmm.
Life at the house was no different with the older sisters gone, but all the chores inside and outside were expected to be done before and after school, or Bill would unleash his wrath. But Rose never wanted to do chores, and she would cry and complain until one of her brothers would do it for her because they didn't want to get in trouble because of her.
Oh, so she manipulated.
Mm-hmm. They called her lazy crybaby. But what was interesting about this is Bill knew that Rose was doing this, and he didn't care. He knew she was not like the other children. She wasn't as bright, but for some reason, instead of being annoyed by her, he thought her whining and laziness was funny.
Okay.
She became his entertainment, and quickly, she was his favorite child. She was the only child to escape his beatings.
Interesting.
Yep.
Maybe he saw a little bit of himself in her.
Maybe just because she's a little crazy.
And
Mentally
unwell.
Yeah, it's possible.
Yeah.
In 1960, the two had their last child, Gordon. By this point, everyone in the town knew about Bill and his ways. He couldn't keep a job. Everyone questioned his discipline. Even children on the street, if he walked by, would whisper to each other or call him schizo.
Wow.
And there were now rumors that maybe he had a different interest in children or children in general. During one of his bouts of unemployment, he decided to randomly start a youth dance club.
I mean, that's kind of odd for a guy who's in his 30s or 40s.
Well, it's not exactly something I could picture him doing either.
No, that doesn't fit his personality.
Everybody found it to be odd. Not many kids went, and it didn't last long.
Everybody's like, I'm not going and hanging out with that creepo.
And we know you beat your entire family.
Yeah, no, thank you.
So Bill was over trying to make things work in Northam. Work was too sparse, and everyone had opinions of him now. And he especially did not like being called a pervert.
Okay.
So
I don't think anyone does.
He had a reputation. So he moved his family to a seaport of Plymouth and rented a top floor of a terrace home. This time, it did require that they use an outhouse.
Ew.
He found work at a dockyard. They were still pretty poor. Daisy's forced obsession with cleanliness was taken to another level. So now she had to. Now it was
It became compulsive.
Yes, it was compulsive. She would even wash and bleach that outside toilet several times a day, neighbors said.
Wow.
Violence in the home did not die down, but Bill was aware of the fact that this time he needed to be more secretive about it.
Okay.
So that his neighbors didn't chime in.
Doesn't want another reputation.
Yep. There was only one time that he broke his own rule and hit Glynis outside, and he cut her eye. It was around this time that Rosie's behavior was escalating. She was getting into trouble at school, and she was naughty at home, doing things like cutting up her bed sheets to make clothes for her dolls. And she was constantly lying. They were only at this house for 2 years before moving again to Mickleton, where he worked in the kitchen of a children's home. Hopefully nothing happened there.
But we don't have proof that he was doing anything to kids. It was just rumored.
It was rumored he was probably a lurker or like did weird things.
Okay.
Because kids are calling him pervert, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, hopefully nothing happened at this children's home, but he wasn't there very long. At this point, Rose was 10 when they moved a last time to Bishop's Cleeve in July of 1964. And if that sounds familiar, that's where
Rena and Fred were.
Right, in a caravan.
Mm-hmm.
Here, Bill and the family were only 5 miles from Cheltenham, Gloucester, where Bill found work in electronics for Smith's Industries, which was a large defense company. This also was only a few miles away from Muchmarkle.
Okay.
This time he made good money, more than he ever had before, and they moved into an estate specifically built for the staff of this company. His job was working as an electronics engineer for flight simulators. It was good work, but it was stressful for him, which meant that he would go home and beat his family.
Awesome.
And his punishments became a sick game of what could Bill think up next?
Oh.
He would lock his children out if they came home a minute late, and they would have to sleep outside for the night. He would throw knives at them, slam their heads against walls, lock them in the coal shed, turn off all the electricity and gas so they couldn't see, eat, or be warm. If the kids were watching a program they all enjoyed, he would literally just go and turn it off in the middle of the show just because. Like he's just
an asshole.
He's just a dick. Every morning he would wake them with a list of chores that he expected to have done before he got home from work.
Fuck off, dude.
Even though the kids had to go to school as
Yeah.
well. When Glynis was of age, she brought home a boy for her parents to meet, but Bill didn't like him. Surprising. When he left, he made her scrub down every inch of the place that the boy had touched.
Oh my God.
And at some point, Bill Jr., so this Bill Jr., his father, Bill, came to live with him, and he punished his father as well. He's finally taking it out on him and would hit him, too, in his elderly age.
Oh.
Life there was a living hell,
Sounds like.
but I don't know. It's like, if you think that life for Fred and Rose growing up was bad, then wait till you see how Fred and Rose raise their children.
Oh God. They have kids?
Oh, yes.
Fuck. Some people just need to be sterilized. Like, yes, do not let them procreate.
At this point, Rose is now preteen, and things are changing for her quickly. At school, she was initially teased. She was a bit overweight now, and the new kid where they'd moved, she didn't have friends. It was a small village, and everyone else, grew up together.
Yeah.
But over time, she just didn't want to put up with any bullshit anymore, and she started to fight whoever gave her trouble, girl or boy.
Okay.
Her brothers had the same issues fitting in, and if someone started to fight with them and Rose found out, she would literally go to that kid's house and beat them up.
So she's a little bruiser.
Yeah. She quickly had a reputation as someone not to mess with.
Did she get a new nickname? No.
Probably not. But this power of hers got to her head. She was now dominant, and she liked it, not just over others, but her brothers as well.
Oh.
At some point, Daisy did try leaving Bill and even took him to court, but she didn't win because he brought proof of her psychiatric stays and treatment, even though he himself had mental issues.
Yeah.
So she tried to get a job, even though she hadn't worked all those years, something that could at least get her out of the house. Now that the 3 oldest were gone and Rose was now old enough to watch over her younger brothers, she thought that she could get away with it because Rose was only going to have to watch them for a few hours, like after school.
Yeah.
Before I go further, I have to mention something, and it's a pretty big part of why Rose ended up the way she did. Although Bill pretended that sex was taboo in their house, turning off shows with innuendos and never talking about it, Daisy either, that really wasn't the case in secret. I don't know when it started, so there really wasn't a good intro to it this whole time, although there's not a good intro
Ever.
But Bill was sexually assaulting Rose.
So she was his favorite. And
And it is rumored that he did this with at least one other daughter. I don't know. It could have been all of them. I don't know. I believe it started at a young age with Rose, though. At some point, Daisy was no longer sleeping with Bill. They lived in separate rooms. Daisy was in the basement. So I'm sure whenever that started.
But he kept getting her pregnant.
That's true. I think I was watching something with her, too. And she's like, it was like the one time. And then she was just getting pregnant.
She got pregnant.
And when that happened, when they started sleeping apart, It could have started when Rose was as young as 7.
Ew.
And their relationship was strange. It was almost like Rose saw her father as her boyfriend for the rest of her life.
We've heard this, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
because
so
their relationship carried into adulthood. So knowing this, what happens after isn't shocking. It isn't as shocking, I should say. With Rose's newfound power and both parents gone for stretches at a time, she controlled her brothers. Mm-hmm. They would do anything she said. She made them do all the chores. And sometimes none of them would go to school at all. The boys started doing their chores first and would disappear into town for a while and get in trouble. They started stealing things and actually ended up at court at one point. But Rose, having already been sexually active and now her body was becoming more womanly, she turned her attention to her brothers.
Oh, no.
She started taking baths with the door open and would walk around naked. She started assaulting her own brothers when they were young. She would masturbate them and ultimately took their virginities.
Oh, my God.
At first, the boys thought it was sisterly love. Having no love from their own parents and how everything was in the house, they kind of welcomed it at first, but of course, they're not going to tell anybody.
Right.
But by the time Rose reached 13, she was getting bored. She was becoming extremely promiscuous and sought attention from others. Not other teenagers, but men.
Oh, no.
When her parents were gone, she would walk to the village, flirting with older men and pretending to be a woman. Later on, she does mention one instance of rape after a Christmas party, the only time that she says she was scared for her life. She thought he was going to kill her. Other than that, Rose specifically went out looking for men to expand her sexuality. In 1969, Daisy had reached another boiling point, and she took the remaining kids and went to stay with her daughter Glynis and her husband Jim in Cheltenham. Rose was 15 at this time. Glynis was running a mobile snack bar while Jim worked as a mechanic, but Glynis was pregnant with their first child. And with Rose now 15, they thought, you can start working. You can take over for Glynis. Every morning, Jim would hitch up the caravan that was the snack van and park it in an area with heavy foot traffic for guys working.
Yeah.
He would often take a break to go check on how the little business was doing. And with Rose now running it, sometimes he would come back and find that the hatch was closed. And instead, he'd see Rose coming out of some guy's car, fixing herself up.
Oh, shit.
After a few months, Daisy got a cleaning job on a chicken farm and was given a small cottage on the land to live rent-free. They thought that that was the answer, but after only a few weeks there, Rose said that she wanted to go back to her father's house. So Rose is wanting to go back to her dad.
Yeah.
At the time, for the life of them, no one understood why, knowing how their father was, but no one knew about this special relationship that they had. It seems like she missed her dad's attention as well. Because there's also a time where they remembered when Rose came out fully naked in front of everyone in the family, and her dad didn't even react to it.
Yeah, he's seen that.
He's seen it. So she went back, but at some point she called the cops on her dad.
Okay.
To say he's being too restrictive. Maybe she wanted to date other boys.
He's like, no, you're mine.
But sadly, after a while, poor Daisy, even with a free place to live, she could not provide for all of them by herself, and they returned to Bill in the summer of 1969. Bill didn't want Rose working for the snack shop anymore. I don't know if he knew what she was doing.
Jealous.
And he told her to find another job. She was no longer in school at this point, and Rose found a job as a waitress at a bread and tea shop in Cheltenham, which required a 5-mile bus ride to and back. And it was one night after work in October of 1969 while waiting at the bus stop that she met Fred.
Okay.
So now we're to them meeting.
Starting.
Here it goes.
And now all the wonderful things that will ensue from this relationship.
If only they had never met.
It sounds like they would have both done really fucked up things alone, too.
It's true, but alone, they probably would have got caught and put in jail.
True.
They were able to keep things hidden together better.
Yeah, because they had a partnership.
Than alone. Fred was a shitty stealer. He was caught all the time.
And he probably was an even shittier murderer.
He was caught literally up until he was caught for this. He's a really bad stealer. He just constantly getting in trouble.
Time to find a new path.
But it's compulsive. Mm-hmm. He probably just had to steal whatever he could. Yeah. Anywhere he went. It's like, ooh, pack of gum.
Yes.
All right. So at first, she found him a bit gross.
I could see that after looking at his picture.
He was dirty. He had really bad teeth. He was short and he limped a bit. He actually reminded her of a homeless person. Those are her words. but he had piercing blue eyes and he knew how to talk. He found out where she was taking a bus to, and that was only a short walk from where actually he had his caravan.
Okay.
So he hopped on the bus with her and they just chatted the whole way back. She found him to be a bit funny. He tried to get her to go on a date with him, but she wouldn't. So he went on the bus with her, I think, a few more times. And later on, he stopped into the bread shop and asked her out, and she agreed and was surprised by how excited he made her, because on their first date, he gave her a lace dress and a fur coat, which he probably stole.
I'm sure.
Rose was flattered. Before this, teenage boys and men weren't actively seeking her out. She was seeking them out.
Oh, okay.
So
different dynamic.
He was giving her a lot of attention and now gifts. And he found out that she was already sexually experienced, which made him more interested in her. She told him about her life at home, and he realized that she kept a lot of secrets from her family.
Okay.
She was perfect.
Dream girl.
Dream girl. Sexually active, already trying to act like an adult, and now she wasn't going to tell anyone anything that happened between them. So remember, Fred's 27.
Yes.
And she's 15. And Fred is still married, although that never mattered to him. But he is still married. And he gave Rose some kind of story like, she abandoned me. I have these kids.
Yeah.
And
poor me. I'm the perfect husband. And she just left.
She
I don't
keeps
know
leaving
why.
me. I have no idea why.
I'm an amazing guy. You can tell.
Oh, I have to throw this in here because I think it happened like right before they met or after. But while Rena was gone, another man at the caravan site kind of became friends with him and took him out to a pub.
Okay.
This was Terry Crick. The man was well-dressed and spoke well. Fred wanted to be like him.
Oh, okay.
And asked for advice on getting women and stuff. And he tried to dress up and act differently, but was rejected at the pubs. All the girls found him to be creepy. So it didn't work. And one night in the caravan, he blatantly asked Terry where he could find girls who got in trouble, meaning possibly needed an abortion.
Because he wanted to start a company?
He wanted to start giving girls abortions.
What the
fuck, it was
fuck,
a dream
dude?
of his. And he yanked out a stack of Polaroids of a naked girl who he performed the procedure on, like really vivid pictures.
Ew.
This man, thankfully, was immediately disgusted and worried about
That girl? She's probably dead?
and called the cops.
Okay.
But such photos were not illegal at the time, and Fred did not get in trouble. So many times there were signs over and over again, but nope.
That was okay because
Just let a
everybody was
man-
doing it, I guess.
Yeah. Abortions were illegal. I'm like, that's literally what these photos are about. How is he not arrested? I don't understand.
They would have arrested the woman if they could have found her and known she was trying to get an abortion.
Yeah. And what's sad about this bit is later on during the trial, Terry Crick did testify, but knowing that he could have somehow stopped Fred early on before he murdered anyone else, it was a really heavy burden for him, and he did commit suicide 2 years after the trial.
That sucks.
Yeah. Especially because out of everything, like everything I talk about coming up here, he saw some photos. Other people knew way worse.
And
he
didn't
saw
say
some
shit.
photos and turned people in.
Yeah.
Just sucks. So R.I.P. for Terry Crick.
But it fucking sucks that you do the right thing and you turn these people in and nothing happens. And then you have to fear for your own life because you turn them in and the cops do nothing. Like,
that's also a reason
like
why some people don't say anything, because it doesn't mean it's going to.
And then that person
put
has
them in
you.
jail.
Yeah. Then you're on their shit list forever.
Yep.
And you know they're a bad person.
Yep. Not okay. So back to it. Once Rose found out about Fred's kids, she was very interested in him.
What?
Remember, she loved children. She was...
Her little brothers.
Yeah, in a wrong way. She had her own little sick fascination with children. And she liked this idea of, oh, it's going to be a little family. Like, it was a fantasy thing for her, too.
Yeah, Anna had that idea, too. And look where it got her.
Mm-hmm. But Rose was surprised by the caravan. Like, she wanted to start trying to take care of him because his caravan was filthy. And that's completely different
Opposite of her life.
to how she grew up. So Rose did start watching the girls. She was aware of his on and off love for them. So she tried treating them kindly in the beginning. And she tried to convince him to be better.
Okay.
But she noticed that he was especially violent towards Charmaine. But once again, he had someone who was taking care of the girls, who also happened to be someone that he could have sex with whenever he wanted. And not just any sex, sadistic, aggressive sex. Rose was much more willing to do everything. She would be tied up. They would be a little bit violent with each other when it happened. And to keep up the ruse, he would send Rose home with a few shillings each week to give her parents because they thought she was still working at the bakery.
Oh, but she had quit to work for him. Okay.
After some time, to their amazement, Rose brought Fred home to meet her parents. All they saw was an old man.
Yeah. And her dad's not going to be happy.
No. And they said he even looked older than 27, even then.
Yeah, he kind of does in the pictures.
He told them a bunch of lies about how he owned a fleet of ice cream vans and mobile homes and even a hotel. And they didn't fall for it. They could tell that he didn't have anything.
Yeah, he's a waste of space.
Just like Rose, Fred was an incessant, compulsive liar.
Okay.
For every scar, he had a different, fantastical story, and it wasn't the truth. After Fred left, both of her parents were very displeased and told her that she can't see him anymore.
That always goes over well when you tell your kids you can't see that person.
And especially when they found out that Rose wasn't even at her other job.
Yeah.
But Rose was already too involved at this point, and she would not stop seeing him. Fred introduced her to dark, web-worthy pornography and convinced her to get into prostitution.
Ew.
For as much as Rose was sexually out there herself, having already experienced seeking out, grown men and stuff, she was still a teenager and she was vulnerable to suggestions.
Yeah.
A lot of people do look back at this and say, well, she's 15. He did this.
And we know that his wife prostitution, that was like a turn on for him. So I'm sure it's the same thing with her.
But Fred didn't create Rose. Okay.
No, yeah.
Rose was already out there doing this. Rose didn't create herself either. Her father and everything else had to do that. But Fred didn't make her into this person. But Rose started entertaining men in the caravan. Fred had it all in his eyes at this point. She was prostituting for him, bringing in money while being his lover. She watched his children. But soon word spread back to her father at his job, no less, because
prostituting to some of the people he worked with.
Yep. And Bill called social services and had Rose taken away to a home for troubled teenagers to keep her away from Fred.
Okay.
But this only made them want to be together more, of course.
Yes, always.
And it was clear that Fred wasn't the only one who felt like he had control in the relationship. Rose started to write him letters in which she demanded the truth of his past.
Okay.
After only several months of seeing each other, you start to see him kind of equal out with her. For the first time, he had a true partner.
Okay.
So this isn't Rena at all. He sees Rose as his equal.
Interesting.
They were already expressing their love for one another, and they wouldn't be able to keep her there forever because at 16, she would be allowed out, and they would no longer have the power to detain her.
Okay.
She planned to immediately go back to Fred, but Fred was still getting in trouble. And ended
stealing
up
and getting
caught and ended up in prison for the first time in his life for 30 days for failing to pay some fines. The girls were once again put into foster care. And with Fred in jail, Rose had no choice but to go home for a little bit, where she received an ultimatum of, if you didn't stay away from Fred, then you're disowned. And she's like, okay, I won't. Well, Rose waited the few weeks until he was out, and then she left. She packed her bags and left. And regardless of what Bill said to her, he wasn't ready for her to leave. Of course not.
No, that was his little girlfriend.
He called the police, and for some unknown reason, she was picked up and she was medically examined, and they discovered that she was pregnant.
Oh my God. Why? Why?
Bill retracted and did not want her to come back after all when he found that out. And somehow, yet again, with Fred out, Charmaine and Anna Marie were released to him again.
These poor girls.
I know. So, social services and the well-being of children in the country was not a priority back then.
Obviously.
Even though some laws had passed around that time specifically to help children, it did nothing to help these girls.
Yeah.
Back and forth they went, constantly released back into the hands of their abuser. But this constant back and forth didn't end. Rose was actually finding it difficult to care for the kids herself. Charmaine did not listen to Rose. Rose wasn't much older than her in reality. She didn't see her as mom.
Right.
Well, with Rose now pregnant, she told Fred that they needed to find a way to get an actual home.
Yeah.
So they moved the caravan again so he could get better work. And once again, the girls were put back into foster care for Rose's sanity in the small caravan. Rena did come back at some point and try and get the girls, but it wouldn't happen. They didn't let her. He ended up finding them a home in April of 1970 in Gloucester. The girls were taken back yet again, or he got them back. They were at 10 Midland Road for a short time before moving to 25 Midland Road in July. Rose gave birth to their first child together on October 17th, 1970, and this is Heather Ann. Fred did odd jobs, but did not know how to stop stealing.
Poorly.
All of Fred's crimes mounted, and he was eventually sentenced to a total of 9 months in jail on December 4th, with another month added for good measure when he tried to blame Rena for some of it and give the judge a sob story of having a family at home that he needed to care for. The sentence was slightly delayed at first, but he was taken in on New Year's Eve, 1970. Without Fred there, Rose couldn't cope, and she increased violence towards the children.
Oh, no.
She was already beating the girls, but Charmaine was particularly difficult for her. Charmaine wanted her real mother. Sadly, Anna Marie couldn't really remember much about her mother at this point. She was young and only saw her occasionally. Rena never beat them, but Rena was in and out of jail herself for her own crimes.
Prostitution, probably.
And stealing. She was also a thief. Rose couldn't wait for Rena to come get them, really, but the children were a source of control for Fred over Rena.
Right.
Charmaine stood up for herself and would never cry, but her bravery sometimes meant undeserved punishment for Anna Marie. The punishments got worse over time, and one day Rose had no choice but to take Charmaine to the hospital when she was 8 because she had a horrible puncture wound in her ankle that Rose said was an accident. But it was from a knife.
Yeah.
No one ever checked on the girls after this.
They were overrun, apparently, with
it's
social
hard
services
to,
and stuff.
Back then, kids are out more. They're probably getting injured more often, so they're not going to immediately check on one injury.
Yeah.
It had been some time since Bill and Daisy had seen Rose, so even though they said they never wanted to see her again, they went to visit her with Graham, Glennis, in tow. They were appalled at her living conditions.
Okay.
Because you know how she grew up.
Yeah.
The floors were covered in dirt, trash, dirty diapers, you name it.
Ew.
And this is also how they met their granddaughter for the first time. Bill refused to sit down anywhere.
It was so disgusting.
Mm-hmm. But Rose's distress was clear. Glennis said she wouldn't stop complaining about Charmaine, and Rose admitted to hitting her anytime she did something. On another occasion, Daisy tried to visit again and found Charmaine home alone.
Okay.
So she wouldn't even take her with her anywhere. All this time, Fred and Rose were writing gross love letters to each other while he was in jail. In one, Fred tells her to be more harsh with Charmaine if she was acting up. And in response, she tells Fred that she thinks Charmaine likes it because she can't seem to get through to her. In one of the letters, which I read some of their letters, they're kind of difficult to understand because it's two uneducated people
can't write.
talking to each other. But it seemed like Rose was pregnant again.
Shit.
But mentions getting a pill from a doctor. And there's no record of any birth in 1971. So if she was pregnant, then it seems that she was able to go through with an abortion.
Okay.
Thank God. At least one child that's not
Save
being
them.
hurt.
Yeah.
On May 7th, 1971, Rose took the kids to prison to visit Fred. He gave her a painting that he did of her naked, which she loved.
Nice.
Oh, hi, children.
Here's a naked picture of your stepmom.
They continued to write each other more weird love letters until visiting him again on June 15th, which was about a week and a half before he was set to be released. But between this visit and him getting out, Rose murdered Charmaine.
What?
Yep. The
How?
little girl. I don't know how she was murdered, but it was her first murder.
Oh my God.
Typically, Charmaine and Anna Marie walked to school together, but that day Rose kept Charmaine home.
Okay.
We don't know how she died. Some say she just lost her temper, but I would say no, because it's premeditated.
Yes.
You kept her home from school, and she wanted nothing to do with that little girl.
Mm-hmm.
Anna Marie came home, and Rose told her that Rena came to get her.
Okay.
Anna Marie was confused. Well, why not me? But at the same time, she was happy at first because that meant Charmaine was where she wanted to be.
Right.
And she thought that that also would mean that she wouldn't be hit anymore because most of her beatings were the result of Rose being mad at Charmaine. And that's what Rose said for the next 24 years, that Rena took Charmaine. No one checked to see if this was true, and that sweet little girl was forgotten.
What about Rena?
We're going to come to Rena.
Okay.
So Fred was released on June 24th. Rose told him that she killed Charmaine right away.
Okay.
He didn't care. Charmaine wasn't of his blood anyway, and he didn't like her. All of her life, she was nothing but a nuisance to him. He had murdered too, and knowing each other's real secrets, they were now closer than ever.
Bonded them.
Yep. Rose still had Charmaine's body hidden in the cellar, and they needed to do something with her. So he dug a grave right outside of their flat for her. Later, Fred would say that he didn't cut her up like he did Anna McFall because she was too small and innocent. But when her body was exhumed many years later, it would appear that this was not the case, as small bones from her hands, wrists, feet, and ankles were also missing, including her kneecaps. Charmaine wasn't found for a long time because Fred made sure of that. When they moved to 25 Midland Road, he was invited back by the owner to help build an extension on the home, and that extension was built right over Charmaine's remains.
Okay.
After her murder, they stayed at 25 Midland Road for some time. With Fred back, they got back to their fucked up little life. Rose was entertaining men regularly with a perfect little peephole for Fred to watch through.
Ew.
Fred and Rose's sex life was...
gross.
Yeah. Gross and interesting. For the most part, Fred lasted 2 seconds. This is something every woman who has ever been with him would say. He was in it for his own gratification. They had sex every day, but he came instantly.
So she never got off?
Never. He didn't want foreplay or anything like that, and he refused to go down on her. Sex itself didn't interest him unless it involved rape, sadism, bondage, even defecation.
Ew.
He preferred watching and hearing Rose have sex with others, and was happy when her interest turned to lesbianism and threesomes.
That's because she needed somebody who could last longer than 2 seconds.
Yeah. And Rose's need for sex was higher than
charts
his.
too.
Yeah.
Well, she had started being assaulted from a young age. That's
true.
Pretty typical, unfortunately.
If Rose had sex with someone while he was gone, he wanted to hear all about it when he got back. He was enjoying this arrangement with Rose very much, and unfortunately, the children saw everything and were very neglected. But Rena was starting to come back around, and technically, he was still married to her.
Okay.
Rena wanted to see her children, especially Charmaine, because word got around that Charmaine was missing.
Mm-hmm.
Because little friends would come and say, "Where's Charmaine?"
Yeah.
And they would say, "She's back with Rena." And Rena's like, no, she's not.
Mm-hmm.
She tried and tried, but Fred wouldn't let her see her. She even went to Fred's family home, Moorcourt Cottage, in Muchmarkle to see if his family knew more. Fred was highly annoyed by Rena and finally agreed to take her to Charmaine.
Okay.
She got in his car. He took her to a pub first and got her drunk. And when he knew she wouldn't be able to fight back, he strangled her in the car.
Oh, so that's how they took care of Rena.
Yep, she's gone.
Aww.
The assumption is that he took her back to 25 Midland Road to dismember her. He cut her up. He kept one kneecap and 35 hand and feet bones before putting her into bags and driving her remains back to Muchmarkle. He buried her in Letterbox Field with parts of her clothing, along with a small piece of pipe and a red plastic boomerang. The significance of those pieces are not known, although some have speculated that he used those to mess with her sexually.
Ew.
After death or before. And this was in August of 1971. So now Charmaine and Rena are both deceased. And like with Anna McFall, no one reported Rena missing and no one looked for her. She was just erased. Her body would not be found for another 23 years.
Wow.
At the end of 1971, a young mother moved next door to Fred and Rose. She was married, but her husband was not staying at the home for the time being. I'm not quite sure what their relationship was and why he wasn't there in the beginning, but her name was Elizabeth Agius. Thankfully, she was not murdered, but she had an interesting look into the family and was assaulted by them eventually. Fred and Rose were both attracted to her, but Fred became obsessed with her. She would go over to their home for tea and to talk and found them to be a nice couple. They convinced her to babysit a few times for them. One of those times, they didn't come back until the early morning, and when she asked where they went, Fred didn't hesitate to tell her the truth. He said that they had been out looking for young girls, specifically 15 to 17 years old.
Ew.
Because he assumed that there was a better chance they might be virgins.
Fuck him.
They would park near bus stops and try to convince them to get in the car, and they particularly liked runaways. He said it was easier for girls to get in the car if Rose was with him. They trusted her, and he said he was looking for those types of young girls particularly because he could convince them to come live with them and maybe prostitute for them. Elizabeth simply didn't believe what he was saying and thought it was just an odd,
joke.
quirky thing for him to tell her. So she continued to visit. On another visit, Rose told her that Fred wanted her and asked if they could have a threesome. I guess she said no at first because it didn't happen at first.
Okay.
Rose also told her about their lifestyle. I guess she wasn't that turned off because she continued to visit them and even brought her husband to visit them one day.
Okay. Is this just like normal part of this town?
Maybe they thought they were going to be a foursome. I don't know.
Yeah.
The husband, being a husband, had his arm over Elizabeth's shoulders, and that really pissed off Fred. He stomped out of the room. Rose followed, and he said if he couldn't have her, no one could, including her own husband. Elizabeth checked in on them, and he yelled that her husband needed to be 6 feet under.
Whoa.
Then he handcuffed Elizabeth. Rose took them off, though, and told them to leave.
And then you never come back if you're a smart person, Elizabeth. But
Nope.
You're not a smart person.
She's not.
You?
She's not being smart, because not long after that, she went to go have tea again. She had her baby with her. She always had her baby with her, too. But this time she was drugged. And she woke up in bed with Rose and Fred.
Okay.
They were both naked, and they told her that Fred raped her. And then they helped her get up and walked her and her baby back home.
Don't have tea with the crazy next door neighbors.
No, don't know your neighbors.
Yeah, this is the reason why I don't know my neighbors.
Exactly.
And I'm not going in their house.
And this is just like one of their probably thousands of ridiculous interactions with people.
It's just what they do.
But it is interesting why they choose to seek out sexuality with some people and then others they kill.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed to come down to whether or not that person annoyed them or they thought that they could get away with it. Like It was someone that wouldn't be missed type of situation. But life was bliss in the West home for the two anyway. The kids were living in filth and they were watching sex shit all day long. Like it's just like their life. This
because
house
she's
is full of
prostituting
sex.
there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In January of 1972, Fred and Rose officially married. And 6 months later, Rose gave birth to a little girl they named May June in June of 1972.
It's sad that she keeps having little girls.
I know. It's really bad.
Like, why do these kind of people have girls?
I don't know.
It's fucked.
And this is when they felt like they really needed to start looking to the future for their growing family. They needed a bigger home, a place where Rose could have her customers separately and where Fred could modify the home to accommodate their sick needs. But it needed to have enough rooms because to pay for the renovations, they wanted to rent some of the rooms out.
Okay.
And that is when they found 25 Cromwell Street. They moved there in September. The home was larger and wasn't hard for them to get, actually. It was owned by the same landlord of 25 Midland. Have you noticed something? He's lived at 3 homes now with 25 as the address.
Is that his number?
Some people say there's like some devil tie to it, but I think it was just ended up being that way. But that's 3.
That is weird.
It is weird. 3 addresses in his adult life of 25. They went into this sort of rent-to-own agreement. And it wasn't far from where they already were. They literally just had to walk their belongings over.
Oh, nice.
It was a semi-detached 3-story home. It had a small front yard, a small backyard, and a garage in the back. Although the garage was used for other things. So it was curbside parking for them.
Okay.
And next door to their place was a church, of all things. Beyond that was a car park for shoppers. In addition to the main floor, second and third stories, there was also a cellar and an attic.
Okay.
So it's quite tall.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of room compared to what they were in just before. The main entrance was on the side and the cellar had its own door as well. They moved in, got settled, and at one point, one of Fred's other children from whoever came to live with him, and this was Stephen. I think I mentioned him.
Yeah, you mentioned him earlier.
Once the home was ready, which included soundproofing the cellar, they started to take in lodgers.
Of course, there's soundproof the cellar.
Mm-hmm. The first tenants were 2 18-year-old boys, Benjamin and Alan. Their first night, Fred and Rose took them out drinking, and then Rose crawled into bed with both of them separately. Each were willing to have sex with her. But this led to their first murder in this home. Not yet. We're going to get to it shortly, but it's connected to these boys. Benjamin started to bring 17-year-old Linda Goff by the house. She was a young girl looking for acceptance. Linda was petite with long brown hair. She was the oldest of 3 children to John and June Goff. Her father was a fireman in Gloucester. She was going to a private school for children with learning difficulties, but dropped out at 16 and got a job as a seamstress and started dating Benjamin. Her parents were worried about her, but they were trying not to push her away. They were trying to let her have a little bit of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
With her time at 25, Cromwell, she became friendly with Rose and Fred. Even after breaking up with Benjamin, Linda stuck around and had short relationships with other boys at the home. And one day, Rose and Fred asked her to start babysitting the kids.
Okay.
At this point, they had 4 children in the home. They had Anna Marie, Heather Ann, Stephen, and May.
Okay.
Anna Marie was now 8 years old. She had seen so much in her little life already.
Yeah.
Her sister and mother are now dead, although she didn't know that. And unfortunately, her own father and stepmother had developed an interest in her sexually. That same summer, Fred and Rose took little Anna Marie to the cellar where they had a bowl, some cloths, a vibrator, and tape on the floor. She asked what it was for. She said she was told that I should be very grateful and that I was very lucky that I had such caring parents who thought of me. They were going to help me and make sure that when I got married, I would be able to satisfy my husband and keep my husband, and that all loving parents are the same. I'm not going to repeat exactly what happened to her, but Fred did rape her while Rose laughed. Honestly, reading about it was terrifying.
It's a lot, yeah.
Anna Marie screamed and Rose sat on her face while this happened. She was in so much pain she couldn't breathe or see, and she panicked and she said that she wished for death.
Mm-hmm.
They kept her home from school for a few days, but it happened again. And it continued to happen, but Rose became the main abuser in sick, sadistic ways. There's one it has to do with bars, and I can't even say it again. It was hard to read. Rose had really long nails at the time too, and she would scratch Anna Marie all over, really deep scratches that would make her bleed. That's why when I say you think a line that's crossed, cross that line. That's what they did to this little girl.
His own child,
but Rose did it more. He raped her, but Rose took pleasure
into the sadistic torture.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's recap for a second because there are a multitude of reasons why they should already be in jail, especially Fred at this point. It should have been handled before Fred and Rose had a chance to do anything within their own sick family situations.
Right.
But they're both backcountry, and the system just doesn't pay attention to family issues in those areas. Both of their families should have been labeled as problem families.
Yes.
On more than one occasion, authorities were made aware of issues at their childhood homes. In Rose's case, cops were called several times because of the abuse that was going on, and authorities would simply come in and mediate the situation, essentially okay, y'all calm down.
Yeah, don't do it again.
All right, good.
Everyone good, bye.
He was beating his wife and his children, and the whole town knew about it and tried to do something about it, and nothing was done. Fred was getting in trouble since he was a teenager, but the system failed to do anything about him time and time again. He was already a pedophile.
Right.
At a young age.
Right.
And they knew about it. He was consistently let off the hook. He got away with rape, impregnating girls, killing a little boy. He was even caught in the act of performing an abortion.
Right.
And felony thefts left and right. I don't understand
how he's still walking around.
And not to mention, his children were in and out of foster care.
Right. He should have been a red flag.
And there were acts in place at this time that should have prevented this to continue. They had the Children Act of 1958, the Children and Young Persons Act of 1963, and also what was called the At-Risk Register. These were things that were put in place to examine families like this and specifically to improve protection of foster children.
Mm-hmm.
It makes no sense how 2 children in and out of the foster system are not checked on.
Right.
It's a summer camp that they can go to
off and on.
Dad wants them again.
Mm-hmm.
When Charmaine ended up in the hospital with a wound,
that should have been
a flag. She should have been one of the at-risk children, but there wasn't. And a couple months later, this little girl died.
Right.
In the end, before Fred and Rose's arrest, the children had been in the hospital 31 times with inexplicable wounds, injuries, and illnesses.
Between all their kids?
Between all their kids.
That's a lot. Yeah.
That's a lot. One even had gonorrhea.
Fuck.
How is that not reported? That's sexually transmitted disease. How are you not reporting that? It's a child. One child was brought to the hospital after being hit by Fred with a sledgehammer. Of course, he said it was an accident.
Always.
Some people say, well, they just went to different hospitals. Don't go to 31 different hospitals.
They're in a small area. There's not that many
probably
hospitals
like
to
2
choose
or 3
from.
hospitals.
Yeah.
Something had to have added up somewhere, and someone just didn't see it.
Yeah.
All right. So when it comes to the murders, Fred was really good at disposing of people.
Okay.
Ultimately, Rose became the master of torture and murder, and Fred was excited to clean it up.
Ew.
That's how it comes off to me, because a lot of
Okay.
people argue Rose didn't do the murders, though. She has nothing to do with it. She has everything to do with it.
And he liked dismantling the bodies. He got some kind of
did.
enjoyment out of that. Maybe he was a necrophiliac.
It's possible.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if she was there when he was doing that,
Yeah.
but the sexual torture, that was all her.
Her.
I mean, he liked it too, but
She liked to watch.
Yeah, he found in his later years that he preferred to kind of sit back and watch. He would participate sometimes, but all of that sex stuff
Was
that
her.
went way too far was her.
Yeah.
So from now on, I'm going to go through their victims as a list, because 20 years,
There's a lot.
20 plus years, it's a lot of time to cover.
Mm-hmm.
And we've already covered so much.
Yeah.
So, and this includes victims that didn't die,
Okay.
just FYI. I'm going to start with one. Caroline Rain. She's 17 years old. She's later known as Caroline Owens. So if you go to look into this case, you'll see both names. I think that might have been her married name later in life. But this is the one that got away. That's how she's labeled.
Okay.
And what should have been the end of their terror already. But as we know, the system fails.
Yeah.
One night in November of 1972, Fred and Rose were canvassing Tewkesbury for a teenage girl, and they found one. They claimed they were just going to a pub, but it was closed, and they noticed Caroline. But no, they
Followed her around probably.
She was on the side of a road with her thumb up, waiting for a ride back to Cinderford. Hitchhiking was extremely common back then. All the kids did it.
And that's why all the serial killers had a heyday.
And it's not like here either. Like, to me, when I think of hitchhiking, I'm like going to California, going 10 hours away, or, you're going somewhere much further, not just going into town 10 minutes away.
There it was different.
Yeah. And it was considered a generally safe thing to do.
It was the accepted way of travel.
Right. So pretty 17-year-old Caroline was small with long brown hair. You'll see that I think that this is Rose's preferred type. She hitchhiked often between the two places in order to see her boyfriend at the time, Tony Coates. Fred and Rose approached her and offered her a ride. She thought they were just a nice married couple. They got to talking on the drive and learned that Caroline was one of 15 children. I would be hitchhiking to my boyfriend all the time too. If
people
I
need to
had
like
15 children.
Fuck, like they just need to get some birth control and just like spray it all throughout this whole area. All these people from
so many kids,
and nobody has the money to support that many kids. They just keep popping them out.
Yep. Caroline didn't like her stepfather and was looking for a job and somewhere new to live. So they told her, oh, you know what? We actually need a nanny.
We need a babysitter.
You'll see this is their ruse too.
That's how they get.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of fucked up because they do actually use the help for the children, but then you might end up dead. Or raped. One of the two.
One or the other. You're coming out not happy.
Yeah. They spoke with her mother and told her that Caroline would be safe with them and they would bring her home once a week. So a few days later, Caroline moved in with the Wests. She shared a room with Anna Marie, and she immediately noticed that Anna Marie was very scared of her parents.
Mm-hmm.
Fred was gone most of the days, and there were many visitors, including Fred's brother John and Rose's many customers. Rose wanted Caroline, complimenting her often and leaving Caroline zero privacy. She would walk in on her taking baths whenever she wanted to, and she would touch her in ways that Caroline knew were
not appropriate.
Advances.
Mm-hmm.
She was amazed at what the couple would tell her, too. Fred was constantly talking about sex. He told her that Anna Marie lost her virginity already. She thought for sure that they must be joking because Anna Marie was 8.
Ew, yeah.
They used to say that Anna Marie lost her virginity falling off of a bike and that one of the handlebars accidentally found its way inside.
What? I mean, who tells anyone that?
Truth is just, it sucks. It's so much worse.
Yeah.
And I mentioned handlebars already. So it's like their perverse way of telling the truth.
Ew.
But as things seemed to go there were constantly people in and out and lots of sex going on in that home. The lodgers were part of it, who were mostly boys still at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Pot, alcohol, music, sex was just all the time.
Yeah.
And eventually Caroline did end up sleeping with 2 of the boys there as well.
Mm-hmm.
She even brought her boyfriend there. So it's kind of hard not to get influenced in a party home, I guess.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it comes off. But not even a month later, Caroline herself had had enough with like all the sex talk. She was just really, really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So she decided to quit the job and move back home. And she did, but Rose was not happy because Rose wanted Caroline and never had the chance to have her.
Okay.
So they planned to abduct and rape her, although it didn't seem like Fred really wanted to, or he did, but there was like something odd about this. Like it was meant to be something only for Rose. Which I'm going to get to in a sec. They knew she would still be seeing Tony and caught up with her on December 6th, 1972, when she was waiting on the side of the road for a ride again.
Mm-hmm.
Even though Caroline was uncomfortable with them and didn't agree with their outwardly ways of talking, she didn't think that they were going to do anything to her, so she got in the car and she took the ride.
No.
But instead of sitting in the front seat, Rose got into the back seat with Caroline. While Fred was driving, Rose started fondling Caroline, touching her breasts and trying to kiss her, and Caroline was pushing her off the entire time.
Yeah.
She noticed that Fred didn't make a certain turn that he was supposed to that would get her home, and when she asked when they were going, he parked, turned around in his seat, called Caroline a bitch, and punched her in the face, and it knocked her out. When she woke up, she was still in the car. They had bound her hands behind her back, and Fred put tape over her mouth, and then they started driving again, both of them laughing. They brought her back to 25 Cromwell. They took her into a room on the first floor. Fred cut her loose and ripped off the tape. She was terrified.
Yeah.
Fred had a knife. I don't know if he cut her when he was ripping off the rope or the tape, but he cut her in the process. They stripped her of her clothes, tied her hands again, blindfolded her, and gagged her. They opened her legs and examined her, they said, commenting on her female parts. She felt both of their hands on her, but only Rose actually doing things to her because she could feel her nails.
Yuck.
But then Fred beat her in her private area with the buckle of a belt.
Ouch.
She was in excruciating pain. Rose continued to assault her, and she could hear that Fred started having sex with Rose at the same time. She can't see.
Right.
It seemed like Rose was the only one that could touch Caroline.
Okay.
Like that was their agreement or something.
Yeah.
At one point, Rose left the room for a while, and Fred realized that it was his chance, and he quickly raped her.
Well, he only lasts 2 seconds. He's too pump chump.
But it's the torture, it's the abuse, it's, that's what you're scared of when it comes to him.
Yeah.
He quickly pulled up his pants and started to cry, threatening Caroline not to tell Rose.
He's afraid of his own wife.
I think he is
He
very
knows
afraid
that
of
she's
Rose.
even sicker than he thought.
But Rose came back and the assault continued. Eventually, they all tired themselves out. Caroline attempted to escape through a window, but with her hands tied, she couldn't manage it. But around 7 a.m., there was a knock on the door. Fred left to answer it. She tried to yell through her gag, but Rose was still with her and put a pillow over her face. Later that morning, Fred started crying again when Rose was out of the room and told Caroline that he was sorry, that it was Rose's idea. It was all for her pleasure, and that she gets this way when she's pregnant.
Oh, shit.
And yep, she's pregnant again.
Wonderful.
He asked her to still please be their nanny. Knowing that it was her only way to live through this, she agreed, and he untied her.
Oh, okay.
She helped clean up a bit and spent time with the kids. At some point, they were all going somewhere and got in the car. Fred was trying to find somewhere to park and couldn't, so Rose and Caroline got out to find a parking spot, and Caroline took that as her chance to flee.
Run like the wind.
She made some comment to Rose like, "Oh, I'll see you tomorrow," and she just runs.
Mm-hmm.
She got home and her mother saw the bruises right away. She had bruises on her face too. Caroline didn't necessarily say what was happening at first, but eventually came clean and her mother went to the police.
Good.
Police went to the West home. Now remember, this is what gets me every time. I said it in the beginning. When I think of their ages, it just drives me nuts. Rose is only 19 at this point. She's 19 years old. She's already a murderer, massive sadist.
And she's had 3 kids already?
She's on her 3rd pregnancy right now.
Okay.
They were put off by her crudeness and searched the home and the car.
Okay. And please talk to the kids.
The kids are not going to say anything.
I know.
And I'm guessing they didn't look emaciated or anything.
Right.
In the car, they found a button from Caroline's coat.
Okay.
And the roll of duct tape. In the house, they found a slew of pornography.
Mm-hmm.
Fred and Rose were arrested. Even though the two admitted to assaulting her, Caroline would have to testify, and she was too traumatized. So instead, they were charged with assault, which was a lesser offense, and they paid a fine.
They didn't even pay a fine. I'm not surprised. This kind of shit still happens today. People don't go to jail for assaults.
But that could have stopped a lot.
That's the problem, is assault always, I guess it doesn't always, but many, many times turns into murder later in life.
Yep.
Or kidnapping or whatever it is, you know.
You have to have a lot of control to stop if you're a violent person. Mm-hmm. You have to have a conscience. And if you don't have a conscience, then
like they've already proven they don't. Yeah.
Their court date for this was January 12th, 1973. Well, paying the fine too, somehow the defense was able to portray the couple in a completely different way compared to how they actually were.
Okay.
Fred was quiet. He was a modest man. He had a home and 4 children to take care of. He just made a mistake. And he said he let lust get the best of him.
Fuck off. It wasn't even him.
And Rose was a troubled young woman interested in lesbianism, and it got the best of her.
Okay.
And she was pregnant. How dare you try and take these parents away from their children?
Whereas the kids are like, please take my parents away from me.
Yes, they were like,
please fucking take these evil human beings and throw them in a pit.
I don't blame Caroline for anything. You get scared. Obviously, these people can come get her.
Yes.
They've already proven that. But it was because of this that Fred and Rose decided that the next time they would have to kill whoever they abducted to rape.
Oh, no. See, that's the problem. Once again, why you have to jail or do something for assault, because you teach them.
Well, I guess I just got to kill them next time. I can't have a witness. Yep, turns to murder. So that brings us back to Linda Goff. Now, she was the one that was
17 as well, right? Benjamin's girlfriend.
And their babysitter.
Mm-hmm.
With Caroline gone now, they offered her a permanent nanny position and asked her to come live with them. She didn't agree at first, but one day on April 19th, 1973, Linda's mom, June, came home to a handwritten note from Linda. It said, "Dear Mom and Dad, please don't worry about me. I've got a flat and I'll come and see you soon sometime. Love, Lynn." Again, Linda was already rebellious and her parents didn't want to push her too hard.
Okay.
They wanted her to know that she always had a place at home. Linda always acted out when her parents tried in any way to control what she did. So they decided not to go after her and give her some space and just expected that she was going to come home. Like she would be back.
Yeah.
You know, a week or so, like she always did. Not long after moving in, she was advanced by Rose. And it was assumed that she did start to have relations with them, but that it quickly went too far.
Yeah.
I would say no. I would just say that she was immediately assaulted.
Assaulted by Rose?
Because in less than 2 weeks, her mother was desperate to see her daughter and she was nowhere to be found. One of those nights, Linda died.
Yeah.
She was tortured like Caroline, but worse. She either died from the torture or they just decided to kill her at some point when they were done with her. Fred went to work on dismembering her, and Rose went through all of her belongings, choosing to keep some of Linda's clothes for herself. Linda's dismemberment was a little different this time. He really took his time with her. Like she was his experiment.
Oh, no.
He took her apart bit by bit because this time it included decapitation, removing some ribs, and a breastbone. Fred claimed dismemberment, again, was only necessary for the smaller graves.
No, dude. That's a weak excuse.
For her specifically, that doesn't make sense because the grave that he chose for her was already ready. He used an inspection pit that was behind the house, kind of like one of those metal holes in the floor when you're working on cars.
Okay.
And it was big enough to fit her body.
So he didn't have to do anything.
He didn't have to do anything. In all, he kept 5 cervical vertebrae, 25 wrist and ankle bones, her fingers, her toes, and kneecaps.
No one where the fuck is he putting all this stuff?
No one knows where all these extra bones go.
He has like a treasure trove somewhere full of just bones.
It's somewhere. The tape was still wrapped around her head.
Oh my God.
She was buried with other evidence, including string and ripped, burned, knotted pieces of her clothing. Something I've noticed is part of the torture and murders they carry out, even going back all the way to Anna McFall, they use pieces of the victim's clothing as like part of securing them and then just bury it with them. June Goff couldn't take it any longer, though, and after not hearing from her daughter for a couple of weeks, she did set out to find her. She didn't know what flat Linda was referring to, so she had to ask around. Eventually, she was led to the Wests' home and confronted them. June knew Rose, she realized. She had actually seen Rose once when she came to pick up Linda one night for a drink, like a few weeks before. And she immediately noticed that Rose was wearing Linda's slippers.
Yeah, that's weird.
She also noticed some of Linda's clothing hanging on a clothing line. When she pointed that out, Rose told her that Linda had stayed with them and was helping to care for the children, but that she hit Anna Marie. And they told her that she needed to leave, and she just left some of her stuff behind. This is the same excuse they used to explain Linda's disappearance to other lodgers, that she was violent.
Yeah, with the kids, because they're such good parents and treat their kids so sweetly.
They told her that she mentioned that she was going to a resort near Bristol.
Okay.
For some reason, Linda was never officially listed as missing. Her mother continued to look for her, but there was never a search for Linda. And I think it's just because of her delinquency.
Yeah, and she's young and they're just assuming.
They go after troubled teens for a reason.
Yes, because of situations like this, people just write them off, that just like the runaways, the sex workers, all of that.
Yeah. And I noticed too that Rose and Fred, like I said, they always tell like some version of a truth. Like when they're talking to other people and telling stories. Who was it? It was Anna Marie. I was watching her in a documentary later in life. And she said, if you take something, cut it in half and then cut it in half and you'll find the truth.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. But they're always tying all their lies together. I think it maybe helped them to keep things straight.
Yeah.
But claiming that Linda hit Anna Marie, it was a bit of a cover up for the abuse that Anna Marie was experiencing, so that if someone saw a bruise that day, oh, that was Linda.
That's why we got rid of her.
Rose would beat Anna Marie so badly that she was starting to pass out in bathtubs.
Wow.
When she was taken to the hospital in July of 1973, the nurse or doctor or whatever noticed scratches and bruises all along her little chest.
Take her away.
And she told them that Rose did it.
How much more do these people need?
Nothing was done. And this was only 4 months after their court date for what they did to Caroline, which they paid a fine. So the charge is there.
It's very clear that they are assaulters.
I don't know. I don't understand how they keep getting away with stuff. It's there. Like, I've listened to things of, well, you know, the system wasn't set up that great yet. I'm like, no, you definitely had
clear
points in time where this was clear and something should have been done. And just what's even more fucked up is, remember, Rose is pregnant at this time. So not only did they assault another girl in a very fucked up way, now they killed another girl and she's heavily pregnant.
Yeah.
It just adds this like layer of...
And she's 19.
Pure evil. And she's young. Yeah. And it was about a month after this, after Anna Marie was in the hospital, that she gave birth to their first son together, August 19th, 1973, Stephen, or just Steve.
Okay.
So there are two Stevens, but so I'm just going to refer to him as Steve. This is Steve. And something also to mention, just kind of going back, why was nothing done, is like, how did all the people staying in this house not hear anything? Yes, the cellar was soundproof, but they also said... people talking about this house, you know, later in life, they also said that Fred was constantly renovating. So they were used to all this loud noise going on. He expanded the cellar, which included installing hooks into the beams to hang his victims from.
Wonderful.
He tore down the garage out back to build an extension to the home with another bathroom. So now Linda is going to be covered in a bathroom.
Okay.
He even built partly onto the wall of the church next door, I guess. I think that you can see the remnants of that today.
Okay.
How he was allowed to do all this, I don't know.
He doesn't even own the house.
He doesn't own it yet. He does eventually buy it, but the landlord just didn't care what he did with this
do
property.
Whatever you want.
Yeah.
Leave me alone, pay my money.
I don't even know if he checked on it. For
Obviously
all I know,
not.
he didn't even look to see what was going on. But anyway, we're to our next victim, and this is Carol Ann Cooper. She went by Kaz, which was also tattooed on her left forearm. She was a troubled 15-year-old. She was born in Luton, Bedfordshire, but at the time was living at a children's home in Worcester. Her parents divorced when she was 3, and her mother died shortly after. Her father decided he couldn't take care of her and put her into foster care. All these
Seems
men...
to be what you do.
Yep. We do not know much about what happened to her aside from what she did the night before she went missing and the condition of her remains when she was eventually found 20 years later. On November 10th, 1973, Carol was with her boyfriend and a group of friends. They went to the movies, had some food, and went to a pub. Around 9 p.m., he dropped her off at a bus stop because she was going to be spending the weekend with her grandmother. She did board the bus in Worcester as her boyfriend watched her get on and they waved goodbye to each other. So Fred and Rose must have grabbed her from wherever she got off.
Okay.
We can all imagine what was done to her.
Mm-hmm.
The cellar became a burial ground, starting with Carol.
Okay.
He dismembered her at the thighs. She was decapitated, still gagged with the tape around her head. She had a knife wound to the head.
Ouch.
Forensics later couldn't tell if it was before or after she died, but being stabbed in the head.
Yeah, that's brutal.
Mm-hmm. She was buried with all of the torture items, like with others, ropes and other things. He kept parts of her hands, feet, and cervical vertebrae and breastbone again. Unlike the others up to this point, she was reported missing.
Okay.
Although Carol was known to run away sometimes, she always took things with her, and she did not do that this time.
So the parents knew.
Well, the parents aren't in her life anymore.
That's right.
She was
fosters.
Yeah. But yeah, where she was staying, they knew, and Grandma was expecting her. She didn't show up. She was searched for, but nothing turned up. So that's Carol. Next is Lucy Partington. Lucy was unlike the others. She was not a teenager. She was 21 years old.
Okay.
Still young. She did not come from a broken home. She wasn't searching for acceptance or nanny work. She was a college student.
Okay.
Lucy was born in St. Albans and moved to Bishop's Cleeve with her family shortly after. Her family was considered to be upper middle class. Her father, Roger, was an industrial chemist, and her mother, Margaret, which is amazing for the time, was an architect.
That is, architect.
Yeah.
A woman, especially.
A woman, yep.
Badass.
And her uncle, Sir Kingsley, was a well-known novelist who later had a son that also became a famous writer. So got some smarty pants here.
Yeah.
Her parents were separated, but she was doing really well for herself. She was in her last year at Exeter University. She majored in medieval English. She had recently converted to Catholicism and was pretty devout. Prior to this, she studied at Pate's Grammar School and was part of the theater there. She was really serious about her studies, and she did not have a boyfriend. Like, she didn't care. She was busy.
She's going to do big things.
And she was already in the process of applying to graduate schools. She lived alone, and she spent her nights reading by the fire.
So she's doing everything right to not be murdered by these crazy-ass people. So
Correct.
What? Okay.
It was Christmas time, 1973. She went home to visit her mother in Gretton near Cheltenham, attending a party, and went to midnight mass. The morning of the 27th, Lucy was still sleeping when her mother left for work. Later that day, she went to the city with her brother, David. We know what she was wearing that day, and I just wanted to mention it because I think it also shows her personality a bit. She was wearing pink jean bell-bottoms.
Nice.
With a pink shirt, brown shoes, and a rust-colored raincoat. She was very colorful.
Very, very colorful.
Very 70s.
I was about to say, that was the time
with
all the color.
They spent time walking about, and in the evening, they went their separate ways because Lucy was going to visit a friend in Pittville, not far away. She met her friend Helen at Pate's 4 years earlier. They had history group together and became best friends. Helen was wheelchair bound from disabilities that she had since birth. So Lucy made an effort to visit Helen as often as she could. They visited, and Lucy left Helen's around 10:15 p.m. to catch the bus back to Gretton. There was a chance she might miss the bus, and Helen's family knew this.
Okay.
On her way out, they told her if she did, come back, and Helen's dad would take her home.
Okay.
The reason he didn't take her in the first place was because she wanted to drop off this application in a post box on her way to the stop. So the bus stop is 3 minutes from this house. Okay. Lucy never came back to the house, and she never got home to her mother, which is boggling because in just a few minutes,
she's gone.
She's spotted by Rose and Fred. Maybe she was followed before, I don't know. But the assumption is she was approached pretty much right away after realizing that maybe she missed the bus and didn't want to bother Helen's parents to drive her home that late at night.
And it's a couple, so she'd be like, yeah, I'll get in the car with them.
She was cautious of men because one of her friends had actually been harassed to get in a car a few years back. And interestingly enough, later she said it matched the description of Fred.
Ew. I bet they're waiting at the bus stop. That's
what they do is they wait at bus stops.
They're just waiting there looking for a girl who's going to miss the bus or whatever.
The likelihood of this particular bus stop, it's just, that's what's crazy.
That's just where they were that night.
And unfortunately, what happened to Lucy might have been worse than any of the others because there's evidence that she might have endured torture for a week.
Oh, no. Like they kept her in the cellar?
They did something because she went missing on the 27th. And Fred ended up in the hospital half an hour past midnight the morning of January 3rd.
Okay.
Fred avoided hospitals at all costs, but he had a really big slash in his hand. And the thought is that he injured himself dismembering her in the middle of the night.
Mm-hmm.
So that would mean that she was there for almost a week. So also because he dismembered her as he did the rest, but this time he was trying to remove a shoulder blade, which is a particularly difficult bone to remove, I guess. And the knife he was using was really, really, really sharp. It is believed he cut himself while trying to remove the shoulder blade, which is further assumed because when her grave was later uncovered in the cellar, the knife was buried with her. And there weren't knives previously buried with the others. So he's probably pissed, or he didn't want to risk cutting himself again with another body. So he
like,
just
fuck this knife.
Threw that knife in there. Lucy was promptly reported missing.
Yeah.
And there was a massive search. She was on the news.
Mm-hmm.
There were divers out in water areas, search dogs. Her disappearance was top news for quite some time. No one could figure out how she disappeared in a matter of minutes.
Yeah.
But as with the others, she was never found.
Till 20-something years later.
Till 1994. So that's the year we're waiting to get to here. Okay. 1994. And that is where we are going to stop today because I have just as much left to cover in this case. But I am going to end with some words from Lucy's sister, Marion.
Okay.
When Lucy's remains were eventually found, Marion understandably had a very difficult time moving on.
Yeah.
They searched for her for 20 years.
Yeah.
They went from the anguish of not knowing to knowing and then having to imagine
what happened and
what Lucy went through and the terror she felt. In her struggle to accept what happened, Marion realized that she needed to find a way to forgive the Wests. She's a very sweet woman.
Good luck.
I listened to her explain her reasoning for this. She ended up writing a letter to Rose. And she held on to it for some time, I believe 4 years, but did eventually send it because she felt like if something happened, like she would regret it if she hadn't sent this letter. It said, "I am sending you these words in the hope that they may help you in some way. Please know that I do not feel any hostility towards you, just a sadness, a deep sadness that this has happened and that your heart could not feel a truth that I wish you could know. Our lives are connected, and I am sending you the spring of a branch as a token of hope. May you be less burdened by fear." There was more, but essentially her forgiveness was to show Rose that even though you're so far removed from your actions and you reveled in your depravity, I beat you at your own game because in the midst of all of this, I found positivity.
Mm-hmm.
Her perspective in life went from darkness and being closed up to being open and full of love and gratitude. The reason why she has forgiveness and thanking, as she says, is because she would have never reached the point in her life when she would have ever been this open and accepting unless this happened.
Okay. So it's for her more than for Rose.
She didn't tell her she forgave her. Like she didn't say that in the letter, at least.
No. How could you ever?
But she was taking back her power.
Yeah.
But this is what's fucked up. Marion received word back from Rose.
And what did Rose
say? Not from Rose. The prison wrote her back on behalf of Rose. And this was in July of 2008. It said, "Mrs. West has received your letter and asked me to relay a message on her behalf and asked that you please cease all correspondence. She does not wish to receive any further letters from you. Any further letters will be kept in security."
Okay.
Cool, Rose. Like you can do all this stuff, but you can't handle one letter.
Yeah. No.
Can't handle one letter from someone. Marion went on to write a book, If You Sit Very Still. It's about Lucy. I actually really wanted to read this book, but I didn't have the time.
Yeah.
So if you want to go read that, there are a lot of books on this case and I had to be selective.
Yeah.
But I'm going to finish this off with a poem that Marion shared that Lucy actually wrote.
Aww.
And she wrote it when she was 16. And I think it kind of sums up what Marion was trying to say with forgiveness, or, you know, that life is so much bigger than the little boxes we put ourselves into. Lucy wrote, Things are as big as you make them. I can fill a whole body, a whole day of life with worry about a few words on one scrap of paper. And yet the same evening, looking up can frame my fingers to fit the sky in my cupped hands.
Wow.
I
At
was a
16.
16-year-old.
That's very, philosophical.
So that's it. We'll be back with part 2 next week. And, that's where all the extra fun details are. So come back for that.
More House of Horrors.
So many more victims. And I know it's a difficult story, but
yeah,
it's crazy.
So very, very sad.
It's
for
so sad.
everyone involved.
Already their damage is insane.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking all the kids they have, and like there's just this wide web of people affected by these two people. And it like gives me this hopelessness feeling about humanity sometimes when we hear these cases. So we're going to go take a break and look at something happy.
Yeah. Yep, I need it.
We need a break. We'll look forward to seeing you guys next week. In the meantime, you know where to find us on all the socials, and definitely come back.
Send in your lab reports, please, to lucidlabpodcast@gmail.com. Go leave us a review, 5 stars.
Yes.
Say a little something.
Comments, nice comments.
And
in the meantime,
stay lucid. Don't be Rose.
Yeah, it's hard to
Don't be
have
Fred.
anything light after this.
I don't know. Just be nice people. Goodbye.
Bye.